Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Mabee Abel. There are books and films that help teach ways to confront criminals and appropriate behavior during kidnappings or critical situations. However, reading about these scenarios and actually experiencing them are two different things. Barbara Abel fully realized this when one of the most dangerous criminals in the U.S. showed up at her doorstep. On November 14, 1974, a scared Dale ran to his neighbor's house and began knocking frantically on the door. When the neighbor opened it, he found the boy covered in blood with strange marks on his ankles. Dale explained that the marks were from ropes used by an unknown man who had tied him and his Aunt Beverly while his mother, Barbara, was kidnapped. The neighbor quickly called 911. When the police arrived at the Abel family's home, it looked like a crime scene. There was blood everywhere, and the neighbor noted that Barbara's car was missing, along with her. Dale assisted the detectives by providing details about his mother, 31-year-old Barbara Mabee Abel, who had a twin sister named Beverly, who had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The twin sisters shared a deep bond from childhood. Barbara consistently supported and cared for Beverly. As they grew older, their relationship became stronger, with Barbara always striving to improve Beverly's quality of life and help her manage daily challenges. Barbara was smart, cheerful, and serious when necessary. After their father passed away, young Barbara took on many household responsibilities to help her mother. Throughout her life, she maintained a positive outlook and supported her loved ones during tough times. In April 1968, she gave birth to her son, Dale, and felt immense joy as a new mother. However, she soon faced challenges, primarily due to her breakup with the baby's father. Their disagreements had begun about a year before Dale was born. Although they hoped Dale would help resolve their issues, things only got worse. Ultimately, Barbara chose to raise her son as a single mother, later reflecting that this was the right decision for both of them, as it allowed her to create a stable environment for herself and her child. Unfortunately, the family faced a series of challenges. In May 1974, their mother passed away from an illness, leaving them in shock. It felt as if their world had collapsed. Their family had always been very close, so their mother's death deeply affected both Barbara and Beverly. Despite their grief, they tried to maintain a normal environment for the younger generation. Barbara worked diligently, writing and taking a job at a radio station, while Beverly managed household chores. They lived in a modest home in Palm Beach, Florida, and surrounded 6-year-old Dale with love and care, gradually recovering from this tragedy. On November 14, 1974, it seemed like an ordinary day for the Abel family. Beverly assisted Barbara in getting ready for work, and Dale was preparing for school. After dropping Dale off, Barbara went to the radio station where she worked as a news editor. Around noon, she tried to call Beverly, who was at home, but there was no answer. This was strange because Beverly never missed calls. She was always eager to talk, but this time she didn't even call back. Initially, Barbara thought her sister might have fallen asleep and didn't think much of it, so she continued with her work. After leaving the radio station around 5 p.m., she picked up Dale and headed home, expecting to see her sister there. As soon as they entered, she called Beverly, but there was no answer. Barbara asked her son to find his aunt, thinking she might have been listening to music and hadn't heard them come home. While Barbara went to the kitchen, she felt a sudden and intense fear that sent a chill down her spine. It was a deep, instinctual dread, and in that moment, she heard a voice say, "Don't turn around or I'll attack." Just then, her son Dale rushed into the kitchen and said that his aunt was in the bedroom and bleeding. When Barbara turned around, she saw a man pointing a weapon at her and Dale. Staying calm, she told the intruder that she needed to see her twin sister because she was worried about her. This was a risky move, but it seemed to impress the man, who agreed to let her see her sister. With the weapon still aimed at them, Barbara and Dale cautiously walked toward the bedroom, trying to keep Dale away from the armed man. Beverly was in the bedroom, lying on the bed with a gag in her mouth. crying. Barbara kissed her sister and whispered that everything would be all right. Barbara noticed that Beverly was undressed under the blanket. Unable to hold back her feelings, she confronted the attacker, questioning whether he had abused Beverly. He responded with laughter, claiming he had attempted to assault Beverly but had failed. His cruel smile and taunting words sent another chill down Barbara's spine. Following this, she tried to bribe the assailant. She revealed that she had a significant amount of money at home and was willing to give him her car keys. In return, she pleaded with him to leave them alone and not to harm them. The stranger, however, expressed his desire to take her child and reach for the boy. Barbara firmly declared that she would never give up her son and instead offered to take Dale's place. The man agreed. The assailant identified himself as Paul John Knowles and claimed he had just escaped from prison, stating he had no plans to return. He warned Barbara that he wouldn't harm her as long as she followed his orders exactly. Although Barbara knew he was lying and likely wouldn't let her go easily, she felt she had no good options left. Her primary concern was the safety of her son and her injured sister, who needed help. However, Paul was determined to keep them as hostages to buy time for his escape. He tightly bound Dale's and Beverly's hands and feet on the bed. Barbara was horrified at the thought of leaving her loved ones in such a vulnerable state, but she realized that any resistance could endanger their lives. Throughout this terrifying situation, she remained calm, speaking to her family as if everything was normal, reassuring them that it would all be over soon and that they would be all right. This approach worked. She managed to soothe her child and keep the kidnapper from becoming agitated. Barbara emphasized that they should not provoke Paul, as she had no way of knowing his true intentions. Her goal was to lead the attacker far away from her home and loved ones, then find a way to escape and alert the authorities. Paul accepted the offered money and car keys. He pointed the weapon at Barbara, then got into the car and drove away. Throughout this time, Barbara was primarily concerned about her family. More than 30 minutes later, Dale escaped and sought help. The police responded to the call. They found an abandoned car near the house, which was the vehicle used by the kidnapper. The car was registered in one state, but its license plate had been stolen from another location. Investigations revealed that the car had been stolen from a man named William Bates a couple of months earlier. Eventually, William's body was discovered, strangled, in Ohio. Inside the car's glove compartment, detectives discovered numerous credit cards and insurance policies, the majority of which belonged to Carswell Carr. The man had become a victim of a double homicide along with his 15-year-old daughter, Amanda, just days before Barbara's kidnapping. The tragedy at the Carr home in Milledgeville, Georgia, was one of the most horrifying scenes the investigators had ever witnessed. A 15-year-old girl had been brutally strangled, and her father had suffered around 30 stab wounds. It was evident that the perpetrator was a dangerous individual, prepared to kill anyone who interfered. On November 6, 1974, the Carr home, located almost 7 kilometers from where Barbara lived, was found ransacked. Inside the car, discovered near the home of Barbara, a will belonging to a man named Paul John Knowles was also found. Once law enforcement checked their database, they identified Paul as an escaped serial killer. Authorities linked him to at least 35 murders across the United States. He traveled aimlessly, leaving behind trails of blood and bodies, completely indifferent to the consequences of his actions. He selected his victims randomly, unlike most psychopaths, who usually target a specific type. He took lives with the same pleasure, whether the victim was a child or an adult. He left behind a lot of evidence, but there were no hints about his next actions. Meanwhile, Barbara and Paul were driving Barbara's car when he discovered he was wanted by the police. He forced Barbara to change the radio station. She complied and noticed that he seemed to expect the news to be on all channels, while others remained quiet, which frustrated him. At that moment, she was still unaware of his true nature. Suddenly, he confessed to having killed several people. This made Barbara uncomfortable, so she tried to change the topic to distract him from his violent past by discussing the weather, movies, or anything unrelated. Despite her attempts, he continued to casually mention his killings. Barbara began to act flirtatiously, realizing that her femininity might be her only chance for escape. Barbara decided to try to win him over. She called him sweet and offered him a cigarette. When Paul asked why she was being so nice, Barbara replied that she didn't believe he was a bad person, and even said he reminded her of the famous actor Robert Redford. This seemed to work. After the comparison, Paul became much more responsive, calm, and easier to talk to. They continued their conversation as if nothing bad had happened, as if they were simply on a date. Paul asked Barbara what she did for a living. She replied that she was a news editor on the radio and dreamed of writing a book. This excited Paul, who seemed genuinely interested in her ambitions, especially the idea that she could write a book about him. He expressed a desire to become famous, mentioning that he wanted the book's proceeds to go to his mother, but he didn't specify how he planned to achieve that fame. He repeatedly claimed to have killed many times. Although she was terrified, Barbara tried to hide her fear and remain calm. At one point, she realized that her only chance to escape was to push Paul out of the moving car, but she couldn't summon the strength or courage to do it. Barbara understood that if the investigators discovered who she was with, they would likely conclude that she was already dead. Paul was a ruthless predator with an insatiable thirst for killing. He was unpredictable and armed, which made him extremely dangerous. The most frightening aspect was that they were in an unknown location, and she had no idea where Paul was taking her. The detectives discovered that he was traveling between different states, often switching cars, and that his attacks consistently resulted in death. Occasionally, he took hostages, all of whom ended up dead. The chances of Barbara surviving her abduction were deemed very slim, but her family and friends refused to give up hope. They believed she could still be found alive. Law enforcement officials realized they had to act quickly because with every minute that passed, the likelihood of rescuing Barbara decreased. A search perimeter was set up on the roads in West Palm Beach, along with checkpoints. Authorities announced plans to intercept the suspect, Paul, focusing on Barbara's distinctive golden vehicle. However, detectives were unaware that they were too late. Paul had already taken Barbara beyond the checkpoints. Paul arrived with Barbara at a motel in Fort Pierce, about 100 kilometers from the scene of the abduction. He intended to rest there for the night and had no plans to release Barbara. To avoid suspicion, they registered as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, pretending to be on their honeymoon. Barbara felt that the hotel receptionist was suspicious of them based on her gaze. Meanwhile, she knew that Paul was carrying a weapon at his waist. To allay the receptionist's suspicions, Barbara embraced Paul and acted like a loving wife. This successfully convinced the administrator, who then handed them the key to the room. As soon as they entered the room, Paul ordered Barbara to take off her clothes. Barbara felt scared and protested, saying she was too tired, but Paul ignored her and insisted she comply. While the criminal was trying to do his dirty deed, she thought of everything that came to mind about her son and sister in order to detach herself from what was happening, but at first, she couldn't manage it. Paul grew frustrated and angry, becoming aggressive toward her. Sensing his loss of control, Barbara calmly asked him what he was trying to accomplish, which helped ease his anger momentarily. However, he later abused her. At one point, he shared with her that he had two personalities, referring to them as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, explaining his frequent mood changes. Barbara found it hard to predict his rapid shifts in temperament. After a brief period of calm, Paul suddenly ripped the bed sheets, tied Barbara up with them, and threw her onto the bed before turning on the television. Exhausted both mentally and physically, she eventually fell asleep. In her dreams, Barbara saw her deceased mother, who reassured her that everything would be fine. At that moment, Barbara understood it was a sign and resolved to do whatever it took to save herself. While she slept, she heard news reports and saw Paul intently watching a broadcast that displayed her photographs alongside those of Paul, his identity had already been established. They also reported on other crimes committed by Paul that were known at that time. Barbara was horrified. She understood that her chances of rescue were extremely low. Meanwhile, Paul reveled in the attention he was receiving from the media. Barbara recognized that he desperately wanted to become famous. Later, Paul went to sleep, tying his leg to Barbara's to prevent her from escaping. By November 15, the police still had no leads on her whereabouts. The search for Paul had escalated to a national scale. Headlines in all newspapers and on television shouted that the most dangerous criminal in the country was killing again. Barbara woke up in the morning next to Paul. She had barely slept the entire night, terrified to be tied to one of America's most wanted criminals. Paul took her to the nearest diner for breakfast. While he eagerly devoured scrambled eggs, toast, pancakes, and orange juice, Barbara couldn't eat anything. She glanced around nervously, hoping someone would recognize her, while also looking for ways to escape. However, she quickly noticed that Paul's weapon was aimed at her. He warned her not to make any sudden movements. To her dismay, she realized that no one seemed to recognize them, despite the extensive news coverage and radio alerts. Barbara understood that she couldn't rely on anyone for help. She was too scared to scream or ask for assistance, fearing it would only worsen her situation. She decided to keep playing her role, believing it would save her life. She buried her face in the plate and had a small breakfast. Afterward, Paul and Barbara returned to the motel, where he abused her again. Initially, she fought back, which only fueled his anger. At one point, Barbara feared for her life, believing he might not stop in his rage. However, she managed to save herself once more by employing her understanding and psychological tactics. She stayed calm, engaged him in conversation, and successfully avoided a violent outcome for the second time. During their dialogue, Paul mentioned that he wanted to get to know Barbara before everything changed, clearly referring to his criminal actions. Thus, she realized that she had found a way to connect with him, and her chances of a positive outcome immediately increased. Later, Paul tied her to the bed again and stepped out to make a phone call. Barbara struggled to free herself, but was unsuccessful. Then she noticed a key on the nightstand. It appeared that Paul had hastily closed the door and locked it. Oddly, it seemed as if he had done this intentionally, perhaps to protect her from himself. A few minutes later, he began banging on the door from the outside. Barbara waited in silence, her heart racing. Through the door, he told her that he knew she couldn't speak because of the gag in her mouth. He urged her not to tell the police that Paul had hurt her, claiming he never meant to harm her and was sorry for what had happened. His final words were, "I love you, and I'm leaving." After that, the sounds outside faded away. He had truly left. At first, Barbara was too scared to move. She didn't scream or call for help, fearing he was still outside, waiting for a reason to hurt her. She wondered if he had said those things to test her, as if she needed to prove something. However, she also realized that if she waited too long, he might change his mind, and she would miss her chance to escape. Finally, Barbara managed to free herself using the sharp edge of a piece of glass from the nightstand. She quickly called the front desk, telling them that a serial killer had kidnapped her, then hung up. The administrator alerted the police and requested assistance. A few minutes later, police officers opened the door. After her release, Barbara immediately called Beverly to hear the voices of both her sister and her son. They were overjoyed that she had managed to escape. However, despite the happy reunion, Barbara was still troubled by the fact that Paul was still at large and could return to harm her. Her nightmare could not truly end as long as he remained free. Fortunately, she did not suffer serious physical injuries during her kidnapping, but the psychological effects left her deeply affected. Barbara experienced post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time. She credited her faith in God for helping her family heal and chose to forgive Paul in order to find peace moving forward. By November 17, law enforcement had learned that a patrol officer, Charles Campbell, was missing and suspected he might have been abducted by Paul. The officer had attempted to stop a vehicle and approached the driver's window, but he was too late and saw a weapon aimed at Charles. Paul kidnapped Charles and took the patrol car, leaving behind Barbara's car. Shortly after, the police vehicle was found abandoned on the roadside while Paul was trying to stop another driver, James Mayer. Now, Paul had two hostages, whom he later transferred to another vehicle after killing the driver. About 100 kilometers into Georgia, a gas station employee noticed a man in uniform acting strangely in the back seat of one of the vehicles that had pulled in. He promptly alerted emergency services. After the vehicle left, the employee reported his observations, which helped law enforcement identify the car and its location. They initiated a chase and managed to intercept the vehicle. However, Paul refused to stop, even with flat tires. Driving on flat tires didn't last long. He lost control and crashed into a barrier. Paul abandoned the vehicle and fled into the woods. The police chased him closely, and explosions were heard from the forest. Despite this, Paul managed to escape again. The following day, a hunter saw Paul in the woods. He noticed that Paul was injured and reported the sighting to the authorities. Eventually, Paul was captured and refused to reveal the location of Charles and James, the driver of a stolen car. On December 18, about a month after their abduction, they were found tied to a tree in Georgia, both dead from wounds inflicted by a weapon. News of Paul, the most dangerous serial killer, spread on television, bringing relief to Barbara and her family. She had spent over a day in captivity and fully realized the threat the detectives were facing. Barbara remembered that he had escaped from prison before and feared it could happen again, leaving her and her family feeling unsafe for a while. They moved in with relatives, but this offered little comfort to Barbara. Barbara understood that she could only find peace if Paul could never harm anyone again. During this time, she faced significant psychological struggles. On the way to prison, Paul had a devious plan in mind. He was placed in the sheriff's car, and they drove to the location. The driver and accompanying officer were unaware that Paul had a paperclip with him. During the drive, Paul waited for a moment when the officers were distracted and managed to pick the lock on his handcuffs. A struggle broke out, and he seized the officer's weapon. Fortunately, the sheriff reacted quickly. He attacked Paul, emptying his entire magazine, realizing that both were in mortal danger and only decisive action could save their lives. Paul had died. This news brought immense relief to Barbara, her family, and many others who had been anxiously following the villain's actions across the country. Finally, he could no longer pose a threat, allowing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. After much contemplation, Barbara ultimately decided to stay in her home instead of moving. Although she was going through a difficult time, the house held memories of her mother and the joyful moments of her childhood. Among these memories was her miraculous escape from one of the most dangerous serial killers in the U.S. during the 1970s. As she worked to heal from her trauma, Barbara married Jim Abel. Despite the challenges she faced, including surviving cancer, she raised Dale. Motivated by her experiences and perhaps Paul's quest for notoriety, Barbara wrote a book detailing her abduction from her own perspective. She vividly described the horrors she faced with the killer and focused on the strategies she used to escape the fate that befell many of his victims. Sadly, her sister Beverly, who passed away from cancer in 2019, never had the chance to read Barbara's book, published in 2021, but Beverly was involved in the early stages of its creation and supported her sister throughout the process. As it turned out, besides Barbara, there was another survivor named Sandy Fox, who was also a writer. There is a theory that Paul intentionally left these two women alive so they could write books about him and make him famous.
It was a quiet December night. The children were asleep, and the house was peaceful. However, something terrible was happening behind a closed door. By the next day, Lindsay Quay had disappeared. There were no phone calls, no notes, just silence and a strange account from the man who lived with her. Initially, no one knew what to make of it, but as time went on, the truth began to emerge. What really occurred that night in Southport? Lindsay Wilson was born in the seaside town of Southport, near Liverpool. As one of 6 children in a loving and supportive family, Lindsay flourished in the caring environment provided by her parents. She had a strong bond with her siblings, especially her brother, Peter Wilson, who was just a year older. They shared laughter, secrets, and close friendships. Lindsay had a magnetic personality that attracted others, radiating energy, compassion, and joy. Her life changed dramatically in 1995. Lindsay had first become involved with Mitchell Quay when she was 17 and pregnant by another man. Her brother introduced them. He worked with Mitchell at a local casino. What started as a promising relationship quickly escalated into a passionate romance. Within a week, they were engaged, and just weeks later, they were married. However, the celebration was muted. Mitchell's family was largely absent from the wedding, with only his brother, Elliot Quay, present. On that same day, Lindsay's father witnessed their first argument, a troubling sign of the difficulties that lay ahead, although no one could have anticipated just how severe their challenges would become. Mitchell grew up in Essex, but relocated to Southport as a teenager after the tragic loss of his mother, with a father frequently absent for work and a younger brother to look after. Mitchell had to mature quickly and face life on his own. This hardship transformed into a more troubling side of his character. In the early stages of his marriage, Mitchell's initial charm disappeared, revealing a harsh and unyielding personality. He became possessive and unpredictable, insisting that everything go his way. Lindsay, who had hoped for a stable life, now felt completely trapped. 6 weeks after the wedding, Lindsay's daughter, Robin, was born. Mitchell began to disappear for days at a time, leaving Lindsay and Robin while he pursued affairs and wild nights. When he returned, he brought roses and offered apologies. This created a cycle of abuse that only grew tighter. Desperate to hold on to the man she once loved, Lindsay repeatedly forgave him. However, each forgiveness made her feel more diminished. Mitchell's control over her became more deceptive. He started to distance her from everyone important in her life, friends, siblings, and even her father, who had always been her protector. Gradually, he made himself the sole influence in her life. Lindsay found herself increasingly isolated, with every escape route blocked by the man who claimed to love her. 18 months after they married, Lindsay sought to escape her situation and turned to a local support center for single mothers, where she found a place to live. For a short time, she felt some relief. However, Mitchell tracked her down, filled with apologies, promises, and tears, which led them back into the same toxic cycle. Lindsay returned home, and soon after, she became pregnant again, hoping this new start might bring change. She approached her pregnancy with quiet determination. She might have believed that the baby could transform Mitchell. Victims of abuse often suffer from misplaced guilt, feeling as though they triggered the pain they endure. Unfortunately, nothing improved. Lindsay's mum reveals she stopped visiting her daughter because she didn't want to see Mitchell, and that the last time she saw her was on December 13th. On Christmas Eve, Mitchell visited Mrs. Wilson to collect the children's presents and told her that Lindsay was getting ready to go out. While the family felt uncomfortable, they weren't overly worried, as her absence had started to feel normal. However, as the holidays went by, without any news from Lindsay, their concern grew stronger. It was 6 weeks before a social worker reported her missing. Due to Lindsay's history of domestic abuse, the police responded quickly. Mitchell claimed that Lindsay had left just before Christmas, when she packed her bags and walked away, never to return. He insisted that she was an adult capable of making her own choices. However, both Lindsay's family and investigators found his account suspicious and doubted his statements. By April the following year, police discovered Mitchell had been withdrawing benefits in Lindsay's name. They arrested him on suspicion of murder, solicitation to cause grievous bodily harm, and fraud. Although he downplayed the seriousness of his actions, his comments unsettled those who heard them. He stated he wouldn't even help her if she were in danger after what she did to him and the kids. As time went on, suspicions about Mitchell intensified. He appeared completely untroubled and showed no signs of sadness. He gave interviews, portraying himself as a victim who had been deserted. However, investigators weren't fooled by his performance. They suspected that Lindsay never left the house alive, but they lacked evidence, no body, no confession, and no clear proof. The central question was, where was Lindsay Kwai? While Lindsay's family desperately searched for her, Mitchell seemed to enjoy being in the spotlight. With cameras rolling and reporters watching, he presented himself not as a grieving partner, but as someone who thrived on the attention. Mitchell even sent the detective a Christmas card with a bottle of hair dye and a note telling him to get rid of the gray hair to feel more confident. He reported to the authorities that he had seen Lindsay around town, specifically near shops, and in a black Mercedes with another man. He insisted she was nearby and that he could recognize her, yet no one else ever spotted her. He depicted himself as a victim of suspicion rather than tragedy. His statements were inconsistent and lacked any evidence to support them. Despite thorough forensic investigations, no conclusive evidence was found in the home he had shared with Lindsay. Investigators did discover significant purchases of cleaning supplies, which raised concerns, but without a body or evidence of wrongdoing. The case has reached a standstill. While Mitchell misled the media and law enforcement, Lindsay's family faced overwhelming silence. Her father, Peter, spearheaded a persistent search for her. He distributed flyers throughout neighborhoods to seek help and to confront Mitchell with Lindsay's image daily. He scoured canals, ditches, and muddy woods, holding on to hope but increasingly feeling despair. Peter suspected Mitchell was involved, but without a body, a confession, or any closure, he was left with grief and unanswered questions. Each week, Peter confronted a terrifying reality as he picked up his grandchildren from the man he believed killed his daughter. He maintained a calm voice and neutral expression, but beneath his composed facade was an anger he struggled to contain for Lindsay, for her children, and for the elusive truth. A pivotal moment occurred on June 9th, several months after Lindsay went missing, when police officially declared her dead. On the same day, they arrested Mitchell for her murder. During police questioning, he declined to provide any information, repeating the phrase "no comment." The evidence against him was weak, just bits of circumstantial evidence and a pattern of troubling behavior. Then, unexpectedly, after only one night in custody, Mitchell confessed. He revealed that he had killed Lindsay on December 16, 1998. That evening, they argued in their bedroom, just steps away from where their two young children were sleeping. Lindsay allegedly said she wanted a divorce. Mitchell grabbed her by the neck and held her to the floor for 20 minutes. He then placed her body in the bedroom and sealed the door with a towel to prevent her two children from smelling the corpse. In the following 48 hours, Mitchell committed a horrifying act. In the attic of their family home, he dismembered Lindsay's body. He didn't do this alone. His brother Elliot, who had previously worked in a butcher shop, assisted him. Police believe Elliot's experience helped minimize evidence and avoid mistakes. Elliot Kwai was not known for being independent. Investigators described him as having limited cognitive abilities and likely needing special care. His life centered around his older brother, Mitchell, who had a significant influence on him. Unfortunately, this influence led Elliot into a dark situation. After confessing to a murder, Mitchell guided investigators to where he had hidden the remains of Lindsay. The discoveries were disturbing. Miss Kwai's dismembered body was found in a shallow grave near a roller coaster at Pleasureland in the seaside resort of Southport, Merseyside. Her arms and legs were later found wrapped in plastic bags in separate places on a railway embankment. A bin bag containing her head and hands, believed to have been buried in 200,000 tons of rubbish at a Lancashire landfill site, has never been recovered. One disturbing detail emerged during the investigation. Mitchell likely disposed of Lindsay's remains while out walking with his children. This cold and calculated approach, using casual outings as a disguise, was both unsettling and clever. as he knew how to avoid suspicion. In January 2001, the case went to trial at Liverpool Crown Court. However, before the trial began, Mitchell attempted to change his confession. He claimed he hadn't killed Lindsay, but had only dismembered and discarded her body. His story was so far-fetched that even his own legal team urged him to drop it. Ultimately, Mitchell pleaded guilty to all charges. The court found him guilty not only of murder, but also of obstructing justice and misleading law enforcement. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Meanwhile, Elliot received a 7-year sentence, which many members of Lindsay's family felt was too lenient. The outcome brought some relief, but it did not bring peace. Sadly, just 3 months after the sentencing, the family faced another heartbreaking tragedy. Lindsay's brother, Peter Wilson Jr., was found dead in the attic of their childhood home. He had taken his own life, leaving no note, but those who knew him understood the reason. Peter had never forgiven himself for introducing Lindsay to Mitchell. In the months following her death, he fell into a deep depression, isolating himself and overwhelmed by guilt. He often expressed that his life felt meaningless without his sister. Tragically, it was his father, who had already been burdened by Lindsay's loss, who discovered Peter's body. At that time, Peter's fiancée was pregnant, meaning another child would grow up without knowing their father, yet another victim of the devastation caused by Mitchell's actions. In 2017, Mitchell became eligible for parole. Lindsay's daughter, Robin, who was only 22 at the time, started a campaign to stop his release. She created a petition on Facebook that gathered thousands of signatures and became a powerful call for justice. The public's anger contributed to the rejection of Mitchell's parole requests. By 2022, he had been denied parole 3 times. His ongoing manipulative behavior in prison, such as aggressive outbursts and involvement in illegal substances smuggling, reinforced the arguments against his release. Lindsay's children, Robin and Jack, were brought up by Wilson family in a loving and stable environment, which was the kind of upbringing their mother always wished for them. Their story today serves as a powerful reminder that there are often people behind closed doors who are quietly asking for help. Lindsay Kwai's 1998 murder by Mitchell Kwai tore through her family and Southport's quiet streets. Her cheerful spirit, the light to her children, Robin and Jack, was lost in a barbaric act. The pain deepened when her brother, Peter Wilson Jr., took his own life. Despite this, the Wilson family found strength. Robin's courageous fight kept Mitchell in prison, honoring her mother's love. Southport's community rallied, sharing flyers and holding vigils to keep Lindsay's name alive and warn against domestic abuse. Meanwhile, her unrecovered remains leave an ache, but Robin and Jack thrive in the caring home Lindsay always wanted. Her story begs us to notice those trapped in silence, to offer help, and to hold loved ones close before it's too late. Roberta Saggiassi grew up in the small town of Vasto, in the province of Chieti, Abruzzo, southeastern Italy. Her parents, along with most of her extended family, also lived there. She shared a particularly close bond with her mother. They confided in each other and were always in touch. From a young age, Roberta was known for her outgoing nature, kind heart, and cheerful personality. She excelled as a student and developed a deep passion for cooking, particularly showcasing her talent in baking pies and cakes. She was well liked by her peers and cherished spending time with her many friends. After completing public school, Roberta enrolled in Italy's School of Hospitality and Culinary Arts. At the age of 20, she began working at the most renowned bakery in her hometown, owned by the Lello family. Every family member participated in the bakery's operations, and Roberta became close friends with Fabio Di Lello, the younger son, who was her age and worked alongside her. Spending so much time together, their friendship quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship. Both families were very supportive of they. Roberta's parents took an immediate liking to Fabio, and Fabio's parents admired Roberta for her strong work ethic and sense of responsibility. By the age of 25, Roberta and Fabio had moved in together, sharing a rented apartment while saving money to buy their own home. Fabio, a passionate and dedicated soccer player since childhood, had achieved notable success. He served as the captain of the city's soccer team and performed impressively in amateur tournaments. In 2014, he made his debut in Serie D, the highest amateur soccer division under the Italian National League Federation. In 2015, Roberta and Fabio achieved a milestone in their lives. That autumn, they celebrated their wedding with a grand ceremony and moved into a spacious and cozy house of their own. They were overjoyed and excited about their future, making plans they were eager to fulfill, plans that would tragically never come to fruition. On the morning of Friday, July the 1st, 2016, Roberta, then 34, called her mother as she did every day. She suggested having dinner that evening at her parents' house, intending to gather everyone there to share exciting news. Keeping the announcement a surprise, she planned to reveal it at dinner and agreed with her mother to prepare the meal and set the table together. Around 2 p.m., Roberta left her house on her scooter, heading to her parents' home, just a few kilometers away, a trip that usually took about 10 minutes. Tragically, Roberta never arrived. While passing through one of the busiest intersections in town and carefully obeying traffic rules, a Fiat Punto sped through a red light from the opposite lane and collided violently with her scooter. The car then crashed into another vehicle. The force of the impact threw Roberta into a metal pole and onto the sidewalk. She sustained a severe, traumatic brain injury, lost a significant amount of blood, and was barely alive by the time emergency services arrived. Paramedics were astonished that Roberta was still alive, given the extent of her injuries. She was rushed to the nearest hospital and immediately taken into surgery. Despite the efforts of the top surgeons, who worked tirelessly for nearly an hour, her injuries were simply too severe. Roberta passed away without regaining consciousness. The drivers of the other two vehicles involved in the crash suffered only minor injuries and did not require hospitalization. The driver of the Fiat Punto was identified as 21-year-old local resident Italo De Lisa. He remained at the scene visibly shaken and did not attempt to flee. He waited for the police to arrive, cooperated fully, and explained what had happened. He admitted he had briefly taken his eyes off the road and failed to notice the traffic light turning red. By the time he realized, it was too late to avoid the collision. After hitting Roberta's scooter, he panicked, swerved into oncoming traffic, and struck another car. He willingly handed over his documents and underwent a toxicology screening at the hospital, which confirmed that he was not under the influence of alcohol or any banned substances. Witnesses and officers noted his profound remorse. Upon learning later that Roberta had not survived, he was overcome with distress and nearly collapsed. Fabio was the first to hear the devastating news. He rushed to the hospital just minutes after his wife, Roberta, had been brought in. In the hallway, he broke down, crying and praying, desperately pleading for updates from every doctor and nurse who entered or left the operating room. About 30 minutes later, the surgeon came out and, after a pause, informed Fabio that they had done everything possible, but Roberta could not be saved. Fabio's reaction was heartbreaking. Stunned and in denial, he repeatedly begged to see Roberta, clinging to the hope that there had been some mistake. But the truth was inescapable. She had passed away. As the reality sunk in, Fabio was overtaken by grief and anger. Overwhelmed, he reportedly wanted to confront the person responsible immediately. Hospital staff had to physically restrain him and escort him to a private room where he was given a sedative to calm down. At the same time, Italo, the driver responsible for the crash, was deeply shaken, repeatedly saying he didn't deserve forgiveness. Meanwhile, Roberta's parents were growing anxious. Their daughter was overdue and not answering her phone. They began calling Fabio, who initially didn't pick up. When he finally answered, he tearfully broke the tragic news. Within 15 minutes, both Roberta's and Fabio's families gathered at the hospital, struggling to process the devastating loss. Their vibrant and joyful lives, filled with dreams and plans, had been shattered in an instant. Instead of celebrating Roberta and Fabio's upcoming anniversary, they were now faced with the unimaginable task of saying goodbye to her. Roberta was laid to rest on July 3, 2016, just 2 months before what would have been her and Fabio's first wedding anniversary. The farewell took place in the same church where they had recently pledged their love and commitment. The priest who officiated their wedding also led this deeply somber memorial service. The small church overflowed with mourners. So many people came that not everyone could fit inside. Roberta was beloved and well respected in her community, and friends, neighbors, and colleagues gathered to honor her memory and support her grieving family. The tragedy left the entire town in shock. Few could believe she was truly gone. The man responsible for the fatal crash, Italo, did not flee the scene. He cooperated fully and underwent medical testing at the hospital. He was completely sober and had no history of mental illness or emotional instability. The crash happened at a busy intersection, equipped with multiple traffic cameras. The police reviewed footage from 4 different angles, clearly capturing the accident. Investigators also retrieved surveillance videos showing the routes both drivers took prior to the crash. The footage revealed that both vehicles had adhered to traffic laws and speed limits. However, at the crucial moment, Italo failed to stop at a red light. He drove through the intersection, colliding with the scooter Roberta was riding. After hitting Roberta, Italo's Fiat Punto struck another car coming from the opposite direction. Fortunately, the driver of the second car was not seriously injured, and his vehicle damage was covered by insurance, so he did not pursue legal action. Tragically, Roberta's injuries were far too severe to be treated. Italo expressed his deep regret, claiming he had been distracted for just a moment. Despite his regret, nothing could ease the pain of Roberta's loved ones, particularly Fabio, who struggled to suppress his anger toward the man responsible. The 21-year-old driver, Italo, was arrested and formally charged with involuntary harm, causing fatal injuries. He was placed in pre-trial detention while awaiting the court proceedings. He did not contest the charges, declaring that he was ready to accept any punishment imposed. Fabio closely followed every development in the investigation. He meticulously reviewed all available evidence and met with detectives daily in his search for answers and any additional leads. Fabio strongly rejected the official findings, convinced that Italo or his family had influenced the authorities to minimize his responsibility for the accident. Fabio believed the crash was caused by substance use and was determined to keep the case in the public eye. Fabio organized protests and marches, demanding full accountability from Italo for the fatal accident. Many people, especially those who had known Roberta, supported him. Fabio also launched an aggressive online campaign against Italo and his family, accusing him of intentional misconduct, banned substance use, and claiming that his relatives had bribed officials to tamper with the toxicology report. His social media posts, filled with accusations and cries for justice, appeared daily. On July 15, 2016, Fabio organized a memorial march for Roberta, attended by hundreds, carrying her photos and signs demanding justice. Fabio's rhetoric grew more intense, threatening further demonstrations and even suggesting, during emotional outbursts, that he might take matters into his own hands if the authorities failed to act. His increasingly confrontational tone stirred public outrage but also alarmed Italo's family, who began fearing for their safety. Fabio's hostility toward Italo was evident as he worked to sway public opinion against him. Fabio's actions hinted at a willingness to disregard the law to seek retribution. In response, Italo's family filed for a court order to protect themselves, citing Fabio's harassment and threats. The case remained under investigation with incomplete evidence, but the situation was becoming dangerously volatile and required urgent legal action. On July 20th, Fabio was issued a court order barring him from accusing Italo of a crime, inciting hatred, posting harmful content online, or encouraging hostility toward Italo or his family. Fabio complied, but abruptly withdrew from public advocacy, leaving others unsettled by his silence. Every day, Fabio visited the grave of his late wife, Roberta. Bringing fresh flowers, he spent hours there, sometimes standing silently, other times kneeling, crying, or praying. His family, hoping he just needed time to grieve, chose not to intervene, but his behavior only escalated. Fabio erected a memorial at the accident site and turned Roberta's gravesite into a detailed tribute with photos from their happiest moments. He began spending entire days at the cemetery. He quit soccer, his lifelong passion, and stopped going to work. Nothing seemed to matter to Fabio anymore. His life revolved around the flower-covered grave. He ate little, lost significant weight, and looked pale and exhausted. Within weeks, he appeared drastically older, withdrawn from others. Fabio grew disconnected from reality. One morning, cemetery staff found Fabio at Roberta's grave before opening hours. He had climbed the fence overnight, saying he needed to be close to her. He told relatives he couldn't bear staying in their home, filled with memories of Roberta. Only at her gravesite did he feel any peace. Fabio spoke to her as though she was still alive, refusing to refer to her in the past tense. Fabio's older brother suggested a brief trip to Rome to help him clear his head, but Fabio refused, insisting he couldn't leave Roberta alone in the cemetery. This was a clear sign that Fabio needed more than the support of loved ones. He required urgent professional psychiatric care. Fabio's brother and other family members dismissed his concerning words and erratic behavior, believing time would heal him. Unfortunately, they were tragically wrong. Meanwhile, the parents of Italo, who was still in custody, hired a top attorney to defend their son. The lawyer was confident from the start, highlighting that Italo had no prior criminal record, rarely broke traffic laws, and tested sober at the time of the incident. While the attorney admitted that running a red light was a mistake, he argued there was no evidence to support serious charges, such as premeditated intent. He also pointed out that Italo had followed the speed limit throughout his drive, and it remained unclear what had distracted him. To support their case, the defense presented character testimonials from Italo's school and workplace, as well as evidence of his volunteer work in environmental causes and his enrollment in firefighter training courses. Italo had planned to dedicate himself to public service after finishing his certification exams. During the trial, the defense submitted surveillance footage showing Roberta on her scooter without a helmet, which violated safety regulations. The attorney argued that wearing a helmet could have lessened the severity of her injuries and perhaps even saved her life. Considering this footage, Italo's clean record, and Roberta's safety oversight, the court modified his pre-trial conditions. He was released under judicial supervision shortly before Christmas 2016, with the final decision scheduled for February 2017. Other than a few restrictions, Italo resumed a normal life. When Fabio learned that the man responsible for the accident had been released, he was consumed by rage. In court, he shouted and tried to physically confront Italo and Italo's attorney. Family members struggled to hold him back, and the judge ordered him to be removed from the courtroom. After Italo's release, Fabio became sleepless, angry, and withdrawn. He spent countless hours by Roberta's grave, talking to her as if she was still alive. Despite Fabio's worsening mental state, his family did not seek professional help. They thought he just needed more time to heal. When they suggested seeing a mental health specialist, Fabio reacted with hostility. He began accusing the justice system of being corrupt and incapable of delivering a fair outcome. When Italo was allowed to await trial out of custody, Fabio completely lost faith in the law. He decided to take matters into his own hands, but didn't reveal his plans to anyone. His behavior shifted noticeably. He became increasingly secretive and withdrawn. Fabio had an interest in firearms dating back to his youth. He regularly visited shooting ranges and, in 2006, obtained a firearm license, purchasing a 9mm pistol that he kept secured in a safe at home. Now consumed by thoughts of vengeance, he started handling the weapon often, convinced that it was his only means of achieving justice. As New Year's approached, Fabio's social media activity took a dark turn. He began posting about justice, revenge, and reflections on life's meaning, lamenting how his own life had lost purpose. These posts were deeply troubling, but sadly, they went unnoticed. In January, Fabio began secretly following Italo to avoid drawing attention. Fabio observed his daily routines, the places he visited, and the people he interacted with. Using this information, Fabio devised a plan. On February 1st, 2017, he took a loaded pistol and went to a bar on Via Perth, a location Italo frequented and close to his home. Fabio entered the bar to confirm Italo was there. After spotting him, he left quietly and found a discreet location nearby to wait. Around 9:30 p.m., Italo exited the bar, chatted briefly with friends, and was about to head home. At that moment, Fabio confronted him. Italo sensed something was wrong, and both men froze briefly. Then Fabio pulled out his pistol and fired 3 shots at close range. The first shot struck Italo in the abdomen, the second near his heart, and the third, a headshot, ensured there was no chance of survival. Fabio, an experienced marksman, executed the act with precision, leaving no room for error. Afterward, Fabio walked calmly to his car. Witnesses, shocked by what they had seen, were too afraid to intervene, knowing he likely wouldn't hesitate to use the weapon again. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but Italo was pronounced dead at the scene. Police interviewed witnesses and were able to identify Fabio as the perpetrator. When officers went to his house, he wasn't there. Fabio's family, upon learning what happened, informed police of where he was likely headed. Authorities intercepted him on his way to the cemetery. Fabio had planned to end his life at Roberta's grave after what he believed was an act of justice over her death. However, police arrived before he could carry out the plan. He didn't resist arrest, showed no emotion, and openly admitted to the crime. At the police station, Fabio broke down. He spoke of his intense love for his wife, Roberta, and his anger with the justice system for allowing Italo to walk free after the car accident that killed her. Then he revealed an even deeper motive. Roberta had been pregnant. Though it was still early in the pregnancy, they had discovered the news just one day before the fatal crash. Roberta had planned to surprise their families with the announcement during dinner, a moment that never came. The accident had taken both her and their unborn child. Fabio said his actions were retaliation for the loss of not just his wife, but also the future they were building. He expressed that he had nothing left to live for, wanting only to reunite with his family. After his arrest, Fabio was sent for psychiatric evaluation. Doctors diagnosed him with acute psychological trauma caused by profound grief. However, the court determined that Fabio had acted deliberately and with full awareness of his actions. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder. While awaiting trial, Fabio made several attempts to harm himself and was placed under strict supervision. On March 24, 2017, he was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Fabio showed no emotion during the verdict, appearing detached from the moment. His family and legal team appealed the sentence, which was later reduced to 20 years. In prison, Fabio reportedly turned to religion for some solace, but never fully recovered from the loss of his wife and unborn child.
Timothy Wiltsey was born on August 6, 1985. His family called him Timmy. By 1991, when he was 5 years old, he lived with his mother, Michelle Ludzinski, in the small town of South Amboy, New Jersey. On Memorial Day weekend, which also marked the end of the school year, Timothy and Michelle went to a carnival at an amusement park in the nearby town of Sayreville. On May 25, 1991, Michelle's 14-year-old niece, Jennifer Blair Dilcher, and her mother came to visit. However, their plans changed, and they could not go to the carnival together. Michelle and Timothy arrived at the park around 7 p.m. Michelle bought several tickets for the rides, and then they walked over to a soda machine. While she turned away for a few minutes to pay for the drinks, Timothy disappeared. Jennifer was supposed to be picked up by her mother's friend, who was her babysitter. They arrived 15 minutes late and found Michelle frantically looking for her son. As soon as she saw Jennifer and the nanny, Michelle explained that she had been momentarily distracted. Now her son was missing. The group decided to split up and search for him. Jennifer and her nanny quickly found a police officer in the park and asked for assistance. Meanwhile, Michelle spoke to the officer, describing her son Timothy as wearing a tank top, shorts, and sneakers with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on them. She filed a report about Timothy's disappearance, prompting the officer to start searching the park. The celebration was paused, and the area was cordoned off for a thorough investigation. That evening, the search area widened to include nearby forests and beyond. Finding Timothy quickly was proving difficult. Sadly, there were no surveillance cameras in the area at the time. The following day, multiple search teams were sent out. The local authorities provided a helicopter and a team of divers to check 2 nearby ponds. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search and rescue efforts, covering a large area. Many law enforcement officers worked alongside them in the park and its surroundings over the next few days, but they were unable to locate Timothy. During this difficult time, Michelle's family supported her. According to her father and sister, she appeared to be a devastated mother. Michelle never imagined that such a tragedy could happen to her. Just a few weeks earlier, she had bought a graduation dress for her child's kindergarten ceremony. They were getting ready for the celebration and planning a trip to visit Michelle's sister in Florida for the holidays. Everything seemed normal. Despite facing financial challenges, Michelle did not want to rely solely on government assistance. She continued to work and received some support from her family. George Wiltse, the boy's father, had no relationship with him. Michelle met George after she dropped out of school. She initially lived with her parents on Long Island before choosing to start a family with him. They dated for about 3 years and then moved to New Jersey. While in New Jersey, Michelle became pregnant and gave birth to Timothy in 1985, with George being 18 and Michelle 17 at the time. They decided to expand their family, but eventually moved to George's home state of Iowa. Unfortunately, they struggled to create a stable life together. 6 months after the move, Michelle returned to New Jersey, first living with her sister and her husband. Later, she moved into a rented apartment with Timothy and cut all ties with George. Michelle didn't reveal why she and George broke up, but she prevented him from seeing their son afterward. George didn't provide child support, and Michelle rejected his assistance. She even sent back all the items he mailed for their son. People who knew them suspected that banned substance use might have played a role in their breakup, and George had physically assaulted Michelle at least once. George, however, argued that Michelle longed for New Jersey and her family, which led her to distance herself from him. In the spring of 1991, Michelle, a 23-year-old single mother, was raising her 5-year-old son on her own. She was the only provider for both of them and was determined to create a stable life, which meant she often had to switch jobs. However, her limited education made it difficult to maintain consistent employment. Over time, she worked as a legal assistant, a secretary, and in various retail positions, sometimes juggling 2 jobs at once. Her father helped by sending her money for housing, which was crucial for their survival. Managing everything while caring for a young child was challenging. Michelle frequently needed assistance from family and friends to look after her son while she worked. When no one could help, she would bring him along, which often made her late for work. This tardiness harmed her reputation and led to her being fired from jobs. In January 1990, her support network took a hit when her sister and brother-in-law, who had been a key source of help, moved to Florida. Feeling overwhelmed and without adequate support, Michelle made the difficult decision to send her son to live with her brother in Minnesota for 2 months. This would allow her to save money for his education. Many people who knew Michelle described her as a dedicated mother who devoted all her free time to her son, ensuring he had everything he needed. They often went hiking together and worked on school preparations at home. However, after her son went missing, some critics emerged. They pointed out that her son, Tim, created tension in her romantic relationships. Many of the men she dated were reluctant to take on the responsibility of raising another person's child, which often led to the end of their relationships with her. In her frustration, Michelle started to see her son as a burden. One of her former partners described her as an immature mother who acted more like Timothy's older sister than a parent, saying she often neglected the child's needs. One day, Timothy entered a neighbor's yard and was bitten by the neighbor's dog, requiring 72 stitches on his face. This happened despite the neighbor warning Michelle to supervise her son to keep him off his property. A friend of Timothy's noted that Timothy was very afraid of Michelle's last boyfriend, Fred Bruno. Even though Fred left a negative impression on many, Michelle did not take her son's fears seriously. The friend even speculated that Fred might be involved in Timothy's disappearance. Initially, Timothy's biological father was considered a primary suspect. He had been estranged from Michelle and was prohibited from contacting his son, which gave him a potential motive for kidnapping Tim. Authorities thoroughly searched the father's home but found no evidence of Tim. He passed a polygraph test and had a strong alibi. Fred Bruno was also investigated but was quickly ruled out as a suspect. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, became involved in the search for Tim, they began to question Michelle Ludzinski's true identity. Her behavior appeared odd. She did not seem genuinely worried about her son's disappearance. Michelle was experiencing financial issues and difficulties. For many young single mothers, this ongoing stress can sometimes lead to thoughts of abandoning their child, whom they may view as a major source of their problems. Some mothers choose to place their children with relatives, some give up their parental rights, and tragically, some even harm their children. As a result, Michelle quickly became a primary suspect in the case of her son's disappearance or potential murder. Authorities were eager to find out what she had done to him. Just days after Timothy went missing, she took a lie detector test but failed. A week later, she took another test and failed again. The expert who conducted the tests noted that Michelle showed significant emotional fluctuations, avoided eye contact, and seemed more focused on her own situation than on her child's well-being. Several clear signs of deception were observed, and investigators later found out that Michelle had lied to her close friends, claiming she had passed the lie detector test. The situation attracted a lot of public attention. Family members and neighbors also noticed that Michelle didn't express much emotion or seem to grieve for her missing child. During a press conference where she announced her son's disappearance and asked for help, many people felt she seemed too calm, speaking in a flat tone that resembled reading from a script. This observation increased suspicion. Although her relatives insisted she was deeply affected and just kept her emotions in check because of her personality, the inconsistencies in her behavior raised concerns. Michelle's account of her child's disappearance was inconsistent and raised suspicions. In the month after Timothy went missing, she kept adding more details to her story during each interaction with the police. Her narrative changed drastically. What initially seemed like a case of carelessness transformed into a kidnapping involving different attackers, first two men, then a man and a woman. This left law enforcement officials uncertain about the truth. Michelle believed her son was being held captive. She based this belief on a call from an anonymous individual who claimed that Timothy would be returned within a month if she remained calm. This is why she seemed so self-assured. Although this information couldn't be verified, it raised questions about why she would fabricate such a story. Her odd behavior prompted detectives to investigate her more closely. Given the time that had passed since Timothy's disappearance, they suspected he might not be found alive. Investigators checked if Michelle had received any large money transfers related to a potential sale of her son, but found no significant transactions, and her financial situation had not changed. They searched her home and car, initially suspecting that she might have harmed her son, but found no blood evidence. They went further and used luminol to detect any hidden blood stains, but again found nothing. However, Michelle's history of dishonesty led detectives and even her friends to doubt her credibility. One friend agreed to have her card tapped to try to extract a confession, but this attempt failed. Over the next 11 months, no damaging recordings or admissions were made, yet Michelle continued to offer inconsistent accounts of events. 3 extensive interviews were conducted, but aside from providing conflicting information, she did not give any new leads. Michelle struggled to understand why the detectives were so focused on her and remained convinced that her son was alive and would come back. In October 1991, an important discovery was made. A school teacher walking in the industrial area near the Raritan River found a sneaker that had a picture of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on it. It was known that Timothy loved these characters. A passerby, who had seen news reports about Timothy's disappearance, remembered that just before he went missing, Michelle had bought him similar shoes. Believing there might be a connection, the passerby contacted law enforcement for further investigation. When the sneaker was first shown to Michelle, she denied it was the same shoe she had bought for her son and listed several identifying features. However, she later hesitated and suggested that the shoe could possibly belong to Tim. This change in her story raised suspicion. The police continued their investigation and found that Michelle had previously worked at the industrial complex close to where a sneaker were discovered, coinciding with the time when Timothy went missing. Notably, she had not mentioned this to the detectives. Colleagues reported that her behavior changed after Timothy's disappearance. She frequently took walks by the stream bank, her workplace, during lunch breaks without providing any explanation. After the first sneaker was found, concerning rumors began to spread, which led FBI agents to investigate the area more thoroughly. During a search along the stream bank, investigators found a skull and 10 other bones in and around a truck tire that had been dredged from the bottom of Red Root Creek. These were located near pieces of the boy's clothing, a pillowcase, a Ninja Turtles balloon, and a blue and white blanket that were buried in an embankment 6.1 meters from the creek bed where the bones were discovered. Law enforcement agencies received these remains on April 23, 1992. Strikingly, Michelle showed no emotional response when informed about this discovery. Fibers and hair taken from the blanket were analyzed, but they did not match Michelle's hair, Timothy's, or anyone from her family. The child's body was also examined closely, and dental records confirmed that the skull belonged to Tim. However, due to the missing skeletal bones and the complete decomposition of soft tissue, the medical examiner could not determine the cause of the child's death. By this time, Michelle had begun a new chapter in her life, moving to a neighboring state as if nothing had happened. At that point, there was no evidence linking her to the alleged murder, and the investigation went cold. However, more strange events involving her were yet to unfold. In January 1994, Michelle found herself back in the news. She made national headlines by sharing a terrifying story about how 2 federal agents kidnapped her outside her home. They threatened her with a gun, forced her into a car, and drove her to Detroit, where they eventually let her go. She managed to find her way back home on her own. Michelle reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, reporting that 2 men had called her multiple times, threatening her while pretending to be agents. They insisted that she cooperate and confess to Timothy's murder. Despite their pressure, Michelle maintained her innocence, which she claimed resulted in her kidnapping. Her story captured national attention, shocking the public. Opinions were sharply divided. Some people were furious and called for the authorities to stop harassing her, while others supported the agents' unorthodox methods to extract a confession from a woman they suspected of killing her son. When she returned from Detroit, a note appeared on her door that read, "It's not over." It was thought that she had placed this note herself to support her fabricated kidnapping narrative. Michelle admitted to faking her own kidnapping by taking a bus to Detroit but refused to discuss her conflicting accounts of Timmy's disappearance any further. In March 1995, she was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation for the FBI hoax. The Sayreville police believed she staged the kidnapping to avoid being implicated in an investigation of her boyfriend, a police officer from neighboring Union County, who had been accused of improperly checking the license plates of cars that Michelle claimed were following her. In May, the police department decided not to take any action against him in relation to the charges. In 1997, while pregnant with her second child, Michelle pleaded guilty to stealing a computer from a former employer to give to her police officer boyfriend as a Christmas present. Upon receiving the computer, he realized it had been stolen and reported it. She was subsequently sentenced to house arrest for 4 months and was also placed on probation for an additional 3 years. Meanwhile, Timothy's case remained unsolved and had reached a dead end, with even FBI agents unable to make progress. The technology available in the 1990s did not permit a detailed analysis of the evidence needed to obtain physical proof against Timothy's biological mother. Shortly after her sentence was handed down in 1998, Michelle moved to Florida, and in 1999, she relocated to Apple Valley, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, where she married in 2001 and started a new family. Timothy was not forgotten. In the early 2010s, the case file and evidence were still stored as they were, and the district attorney's office did little more than follow up on occasional tips. After a tip around the 20th anniversary of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, which had nothing to do with the case, Scott Crocco, an investigator with the office, decided it was time to revisit the investigation and see if there was anything that could help solve the case. He focused on the blanket. Investigators reasoned that the boy would not have carried a large blanket through the carnival on the humid 90 degrees Fahrenheit day he went missing. They concluded that the blanket had been taken from Ladzinski's South Amboy home to cover the boy after he died, even though she denied ever having owned such a blanket. Detectives believe that the blanket should have been recognized by people who had interacted with Michelle before her child's murder and then reconnected with her relatives and friends afterward. Several witnesses, including former co-workers, reported seeing Michelle using the blanket. In the early 2000s, Michelle lived in Minnesota with her new husband and their son. After their marriage ended in 2003, Michelle moved to Florida while pregnant with her third child. In Florida, she gave birth, purchased a home, settled in with her two children, and worked as a paralegal at a law firm. She kept photos of her firstborn son, who had passed away, to honor his memory and ensured her children knew he had existed. The investigation into his death is ongoing. Crocco interviewed Jennifer Blair Dilcher, the niece who met Michelle at the carnival shortly after Michelle said she couldn't find her son. In the years that followed, Jennifer, who had initially supported her aunt, married and had two children of her own, but also became addicted to banned substance. She went to Florida for rehab, leaving the children with Michelle during that time. While Jennifer was in the program, Michelle and Jennifer's mother decided that Jennifer's condition was serious enough that they could not return the children after she completed the program, so they placed them with Jennifer's mother-in-law, whom Jennifer greatly disliked. It took Jennifer some time to regain custody of the children, and she considered Michelle's decision a betrayal. At Crocco's behest, Jennifer began contacting her aunt on Facebook about the case, hoping that Michelle might confess or make some incriminating statement. After being unsuccessful, Crocco showed Jennifer blankets, pillowcases, and a red jacket. She immediately told him that the blanket had been in Michelle's apartment and that Timothy had wrapped himself in it during her babysitting sessions. Two other women who helped care for Timothy also recognized the blanket. This evidence established a crucial connection. It became evident that the blanket couldn't have been mistakenly left near the body, suggesting that Michelle had intentionally brought it to the industrial complex, thinking the body would remain undiscovered there. On August 6, 2014, what would have been Timmy's 29th birthday, following a sealed grand jury indictment, Michelle Ladzinski was arrested in Florida and charged with his son's murder. Prosecutors believed they had sufficient evidence to secure a conviction for first-degree murder. The hearings drew a crowd of concerned individuals, and opinions were mixed. The trial was difficult and stretched from March to May 2016. The only new evidence presented was the testimony of several witnesses stating that the blanket found near the boy belonged to his mother. Jennifer testified at her aunt's trial, claiming she saw the blanket in Michelle's home and believed in Michelle's guilt. However, several witnesses said they had never seen the blanket in Michelle's home, and there were no photographs showing it with her and the boy. Fibers and hairs taken from the blanket were re-examined, providing more detailed analyses than the microscopic tests done in 1991. Unfortunately, these results showed that none of the hairs belonged to Michelle or Tim. Additionally, the prosecution pointed to Michelle's strange behavior. Her inconsistent statements and her calmness when discussing Timothy seemed to suggest her involvement. However, the defense attorney effectively argued that this evidence was insufficient to label the defendant a murderer. The location where the remains were found was only a few hundred meters from the building where Michelle Ladzinski worked at that time. It was an inconspicuous area that almost no one visited. Michelle was aware of this and may have deliberately chosen this place to hide the body. The prosecutor was convinced that there was too much circumstantial evidence, all of which pointed to the boy's mother. However, Michelle's lawyer argued that from May 25, 1991 to April 1992, when the body was discovered, several major storms had occurred. Independent experts confirmed that the Red Root stream, near which the skull and belongings were found, had overflowed its banks. It was located not far from the amusement park where Timothy disappeared, so the water could have carried evidence to that location. This was indirectly supported by the fact that many fragments of the boy's skeleton were never found. The prosecutor's approach had evolved since the investigation in the 1990s. They argued that Timothy had never gone to the amusement park. He had actually been missing long before then. A new theory was presented to the jury. Michelle had gone to the park alone after disposing of her son and had asked relatives to pretend an abduction had occurred. Meanwhile, Michelle's testimony kept changing. The defense attorney provided an explanation for Michelle's unusual behavior. An independent psychiatric evaluation revealed that she has antisocial personality disorder, which may have contributed to her confusing and inconsistent stories. The lawyer noted that the disorder became particularly evident in 1991, right after her son went missing. This was used to explain her strange actions, which were seen as responses to extreme stress and trauma. The evaluation confirmed the diagnosis, with evidence suggesting troubling behaviors. Consequently, the lawyer argued that Michelle's dishonest claims, including her stories about kidnapping, were a result of her illness. At trial, the prosecution argued that Michelle had murdered her son. They claimed that due to giving birth at a very young age, she faced ongoing financial and emotional challenges. Timothy had grown up during a particularly tough time in Michelle's life. Timothy did not have a relationship with his father, George. Michelle kept George from having contact with him and consistently turned down any offers of assistance. With no support system, she struggled to improve her circumstances, and her relationships with men were unsuccessful, which further complicated her situation. The Lodzinski family was divided during the hearings. Michelle's father and sister believed she was a good mother, while her brother and niece, Jennifer, suggested she may have been involved in Timothy's death. Michelle's defense also presented testimony from an Arizona man who claimed that a former inmate from Georgia had confessed to him that he had abused and killed a young boy somewhere near Atlanta. The testimony did not provide any evidence that the man was in the Sayreville area at the time of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, and the man himself denied this on the stand. Prosecutors further questioned the Arizona man's credibility by pointing out that he had previously accused another man of assaulting and abusing him. Another witness testified for the defense about a possible third party, a resident of an apartment complex near the festival, who saw several men throw something about 4 feet long, wrapped in white cloth, into the trunk of a car before driving away quickly without turning on the headlights. After hearing testimony from 68 witnesses, the jury began deliberating in May. The next day, a week before the 25th anniversary of Timothy's disappearance, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Sentencing was scheduled for August 2016 but was postponed as Michelle's attorneys appealed the judge's earlier rulings regarding jury misconduct and insufficient evidence. Shortly thereafter, the defense moved for a judgment of default, requesting the judge to vacate the conviction and acquit her on the grounds that the evidence was insufficient for a reasonable jury to convict. The judge denied this motion, and in January 2017, he sentenced Michelle Lodzinski to 30 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, the jury told reporters that their opinions were mixed. Not all of them believed she was guilty. They were particularly influenced by the unusual testimony from Michelle, which implied that she was hiding something. However, they questioned why she would do that if she were innocent. Immediately after, Michelle's defense team approached the case with renewed determination. They aimed to have her acquitted, emphasizing that there was no physical evidence linking her to Timothy's death. Extensive checks and tests were conducted, but there were no traces of the boy's blood or any indication that Michelle had harmed him or concealed his body. After their appeal was denied, the lawyer escalated the case to the Supreme Court, highlighting the uncertainty surrounding Timothy's cause of death. He proposed that Timothy might have simply run away from the park and died from natural causes, insisting that no one had killed him. Additionally, he pointed out that several legal standards required for a murder charge and conviction had not been met. The Chief Justice recused himself from the case, and with the remaining justices unable to reach a consensus, the guilty verdict was upheld. The defense attorney, undeterred, after the 2016 conviction, Michelle's defense team appealed, escalating the case to the New Jersey Supreme Court, where Chief Justice Stuart Rabner recused himself. On December 28, 2021, the court vacated the conviction by a 4-3 decision, citing insufficient evidence to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Michelle Ludzinski was released from Edna Mahan Correctional Facility that day, having served over 7 years. Double jeopardy prevented a retrial. She reunited with her family in Florida, where she had previously relocated. Despite the legal outcome, her brother and others, including George Wiltse, continued to suspect her involvement, though no new evidence has emerged to reopen the case. After her release, Michelle's brother, who had testified against her during the trial, stated that the jury was correct in convicting her of murder. He argued that the lawyer did not rectify a significant wrong, but instead took away justice for little Tim. However, under state law, Michelle cannot be tried again for this case, even if new evidence arises in the future. The boy's biological father, George, still suspects that Michelle was involved in their son's death. He questions whether she committed the act herself or if she knows who did. Many of Michelle's family members also believe she is guilty, citing her strange behavior, inconsistent statements during interrogations, and the FBI's mishandling of the kidnapping. They are puzzled by why Michelle focused her time and energy on these issues instead of seeking the truth about her son's case. Although Timothy Wiltse's murder remains officially unsolved, many believe that his mother evaded responsibility. October 1, 2020, and the quiet neighborhood of Reedley, just outside Burnley, England, seemed like any other morning. Residents on Colne Road were starting their day, with kids heading to school and folks grabbing their morning coffee. But at 8:45 a.m., a call came into Lancashire Constabulary that would shatter the calm. When officers arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them, a home scarred by smoke and fire. Inside, the lifeless bodies of Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi and her daughter, Vian Mangrio. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, police scrambling for answers. Dr. Saman was a respected psychiatrist at the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust. Vian, a bright student at Marsden Heights High School in nearby Nelson, was known for her academic spark and enthusiasm for life. The two living together in their Colne Road home. But that morning, something had gone horribly wrong. The house showed signs of a big fire, smoke stains on the walls and charred furniture, but the flames hadn't consumed everything. Investigators noted something else: strange messages scrawled on the walls. Cryptic phrases like "my mom is evil and this is a cult house." Were these clues to what happened, or something more sinister? The police launched a full-scale investigation, cordoning off the house as forensic teams combed through the wreckage. The scene raised immediate questions. Was this a targeted act? Did the fire start accidentally, or was it set to hide something? And what about those eerie messages on the walls? Detectives began interviewing neighbors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual in the days leading up to the tragedy. Had Saman or Vian mentioned any trouble? Did they have enemies? Or was there tension in their lives that no one knew about? Someone out there knew what happened, and detectives were determined to find them. Who could have targeted this beloved doctor and her promising daughter? To understand the weight of this true crime tragedy, let's take a moment to know Saman and Vian, who they were, where they came from, and the lives they built in the UK. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi was a woman of compassion and intellect. Born in Pakistan to a close-knit family, she was the eldest child and only daughter of her parents, now in their 80s. She was described by her brother as the apple of their eye, cherished for her ambition and warmth. From a young age, Saman excelled academically, and driven by a passion for helping others, she pursued a career in medicine, specializing in psychiatry. Her dedication to mental health defined her professional life. Saman moved to the UK in the early 2000s, settling in Burnley, where she joined the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust in February 2020 as a junior doctor in the specialist perinatal community mental health team. Her colleague, perinatal lead consultant, remembered her as approachable, empathetic, and a joy to work with, always forming strong bonds with patients, colleagues alike. During the global issue lockdown, Saman went beyond her duties, personally delivering prescriptions to women isolating at home, ensuring they received care when access was limited. Her kindness left a lasting mark on those she served. Vian Mangrio, Saman's daughter, attended Marsden Heights Community College in Nelson, where she shone as an outstanding student. Her head teacher praised her for having a rare blend of academic talent and enthusiasm for school life. Vian loved art. Her father, Kikit Mangrio, who lives in Doha, Qatar, after divorcing Saman in 2012, was to say that her loss left his life miserable and without purpose. He recalled her as a loving, caring young girl, beloved by everyone. The morning of October 1, 2020, Saman and Vian's bodies were found. This discovery marked the beginning of a complex true crime investigation that revealed a series of alarming events. Just before 8:45 a.m., the Lancaster Constabulary received a call expressing concerns for the safety of the occupants at a semi-detached house on Cone Road. Officers quickly arrived at the location, a quiet street filled with modest homes where Saman and Vian had built their lives. What they encountered there was far from the tranquil suburban morning they had expected. Inside the house, the air was thick with the effects of a fire. Smoke stains covered the walls, and burnt furniture suggested a blaze that had been either put out or failed to spread significantly. The officers proceeded with caution. In the front bedroom upstairs, they discovered the body of Dr. Saman Sacharvi. She was lifeless, evidence indicated she had been involved in a violent struggle. An autopsy revealed that she died from strangulation. She had also been attacked prior to her death. In the upstairs area, there were signs of attempts to start a fire, but it had not successfully ignited, leaving Saman's body only partially affected by the flames. In the lounge downstairs, the situation was more tragic. Vian Mangrio's body was discovered, badly burned, making it hard to identify her right away. The severity of the fire suggested it was intentional, as flames had engulfed much of the area around her. A woolen item was found around her neck and in her mouth. Bruising in her throat indicated that she likely died from asphyxiation. Although the fire damage made it challenging for the pathologist to determine the exact cause of death, the difference between the two locations, Saman upstairs and Vian downstairs, raised important questions. Why were the bodies in separate parts of the house? Was the fire set to destroy evidence, or was it part of a more extensive plan? The officers observed unsettling messages written on the walls. These phrases seemed intentionally misleading. Vian and Saman had recently been isolating since Vian was waiting for a test result, which was ultimately negative. The timing of the messages struck the officers as suspicious. In response, the house was secured. The major crime team from Lancaster Constabulary, led by Detective Superintendent, quickly took over the case, treating the deaths as a double murder investigation from the beginning. The presence of smoke and fire damage, along with the violent circumstances of Saman's death and the condition of Vian's body, indicated that this was a deliberate act rather than an accident. Officers started canvassing the neighborhood, going door to door to ask if anyone had witnessed or heard anything unusual in the days or hours before the discovery. Meanwhile, forensic teams gathered important evidence, finding traces of potent substances in both Saman and Vian's bodies, which suggested they had been incapacitated before their deaths. These substances were later identified in court as a mixture of a sedative, wine, and fruit in a smoothie, pointing to a chilling level of premeditation. The fires also seemed intentional, one in the lounge where Vian was discovered, another in the upstairs bedroom near Saman, and a third in the kitchen, where the police believed a kettle had been ignited to simulate an electrical fire. These details implied that the perpetrator was familiar with the house, having both access and time to arrange the scene. The investigation shifted to focus on Saman and Vian's close associates, people who had been in their home on September 30, 2020, and had the means to commit such a precise act. The discovery of the bodies marked a significant turning point for the police and deeply affected the lives of those who knew Saman and Vian. News spread rapidly through Reedley. By midday, neighbors gathered outside the police perimeter, leaving flowers and condolence notes. The police continued their work tirelessly, aware that every piece of evidence, including footprints and fibers, could bring them closer to solving the case. The investigation was in full progress, with detectives working to create a timeline of events from the previous day. They established that Saman had been at home, likely either working or preparing for the evening. Vian had returned from school around 3:25 p.m. The crucial question was, what occurred during the hours between Vian's return and the discovery of their bodies the following morning? A significant development occurred when detectives examined CCTV footage from Colne Road and surrounding areas. The cameras recorded a man visiting Saman's home on September 30th, arriving at approximately 11:26 a.m. and leaving later that evening. The man was identified as Shahbaz Khan, a 51-year-old handyman from Ribble Avenue in Burnley, who had previously done work at Saman's house. This connection raised concerns, as Khan's visit coincided with the estimated time of the crime. On October 4th, police arrested 51-year-old Khan, who is suspected of murder and arson with intent to endanger life. On October 6th, police obtained a warrant to hold him for an additional 36 hours for further questioning. Detective Superintendent Supt John Holmes urged anyone with information about the incident to contact the police, especially if they have CCTV footage, dash cam recordings, or witness accounts from the Colne Road area. The investigation into Khan intensified when officers searched his home on Ribble Avenue and discovered Saman's jewelry hidden in the loft, suggesting a deeper connection to the victims. Additionally, detectives found a purple Samsung phone at Khan's residence that contained Google searches from September 30th for terms like obsessed and define obsessed, indicating a concerning state of mind. Witness interviews provided important details. A neighbor remembered that Khan had done odd jobs at Saman's house over the years and described him as polite but somewhat reserved. Another neighbor noted that Khan's van was seen parked near Colne Road more often in the weeks before the incident, but there were no reports of suspicious behavior. Family members acknowledged Khan as a trusted handyman, and none suspected him of any wrongdoing. Khan was a father of 5 who originally came from Pakistan and had lived in Burnley for several years. He worked part-time at Tesco and also took on handyman jobs. Previously, in Pakistan, he was a computer network engineer, but in the UK, he focused on various odd jobs, including a garage conversion at Saman's home. This position allowed him to have insight into the family's life. The shocking discovery of £27,000 worth of jewelry hidden in Khan's loft, along with forensic evidence of staged fires and dangerous substances, identified him as the main suspect in this disturbing crime case. During his first interrogation, Khan's statements were confusing and strange. He claimed that a supernatural being attacked him and caused the incidents at Saman House. Prosecutor David McLaughlin later explained to Preston Crown Court that Khan's story was a weak attempt to imply that he was mentally unstable. Khan also claimed that Vian was upstairs while Saman was in the kitchen when he left the house, trying to shift the blame onto the victims or imaginary characters. On October 5th, while in custody, he threw himself across his cell, claiming that a supernatural force had pushed him. Detectives considered this behavior to be a performance rather than a genuine reaction. His claims quickly fell apart under investigation, as forensic evidence showed that the victims had traces of a sedative in their systems, indicating premeditation. Additionally, phone records revealed that Khan's device was active near Colne Road on September 30th, and CCTV footage confirmed that he left the house after 10 p.m., several hours after Vian returned from school at 3:25 p.m. Khan's wife, Rabia Shahbaz, 44 years old, complicated the investigation by providing a false alibi. This raised suspicions that Khan may have either confided in her or pressured her to lie. On October 8, 2020, Khan was formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson with intent to endanger life. The charges highlighted the brutality of the crimes. Saman died from pressure to her neck, likely caused by ligature strangulation, and had been assaulted, while Vian's death was due to asphyxiation. Her body was severely burned to hide the evidence of the crime. The arson charge resulted from 3 intentional fires set in a lounge, upstairs bedroom, and kitchen. Prosecutors later explained that Khan was motivated by his obsession with Saman's jewelry. He planned to steal it by using a sedative-laced smoothie to incapacitate both Saman and Vian. When his plan escalated, he turned to violence, strangling Saman and asphyxiating Vian before setting fires to cover his actions. The messages written on the walls were likely attempts to mislead investigators. Although handwriting experts could not definitively connect the graffiti to Khan, its content indicated that he was familiar with the victim's situation during their global issue isolation. As Khan awaited trial, detectives worked diligently to gather and solidify their evidence. The trial commenced on June 14, 2021, at Preston Crown Court. Khan pleaded not guilty to 2 murder charges and 1 charge of reckless arson. His wife, Rabia Shabazz, was charged separately with perverting the course of justice for falsely claiming that Khan had been at home all day on September 30, 2020. The prosecution, led by David McLaughlin, presented a thorough case, arguing that Khan's actions were premeditated, cruel, and motivated by financial gain. McLaughlin dismissed Khan's initial claims of supernatural involvement. Instead, Khan suggested that someone else had entered the house after he left at 10 p.m. Khan claimed that the jewelry in question had been entrusted to him for safekeeping while Saman was away, but the prosecution argued that Khan's intention was theft, which escalated to murder when he was confronted. Khan's defense initially asserted his innocence and indicated that his mental state should be examined. During his testimony, Khan described his relationship with Saman and Vian, referring to Vian as if she were a daughter. He maintained that both victims were alive when he left the house. He also stated that medication had helped clarify his thoughts, retracting the supernatural power story but not providing any credible alternative suspect. On June 29, after 3 weeks of evidence, Khan requested to dismiss the jury, expressing concerns about his mental health. However, the justice denied this request. The following day, June 30th, after being confronted with overwhelming evidence, including CCTV footage, phone records, and jewelry, Khan pleaded guilty to all charges, 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson. This sudden change took the courtroom by surprise, eliminating the need for the jury to deliberate further but extending the suffering of the victims' families, who had already endured weeks of distressing testimony. Rabia Shabazz's trial continued as she maintained her innocence regarding charges of perverting the course of justice. Her defense argued that she was naive and confused about dates due to stress, lack of sleep, and insufficient food, mistakenly believing Khan was at Tesco on September 30th. In contrast, the prosecution asserted that her false statement made the day after Khan's arrest was a deliberate attempt to protect him. On July 1st, after less than 2 hours of discussion, the jury found her guilty. The sentencing occurred on October 5, 2021. Khan was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years. The lengthy sentence reflected the premeditated and intentional nature of the murders, which were driven by financial motives. Rabia Shabazz's attempt to shield her husband, Khan, by providing a false alibi led to her conviction for perverting the course of justice, earning her a 15-month prison sentence. Early in the investigation, a second suspect, a 56-year-old man, was arrested but released without charge, narrowing the focus to Khan. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi's legacy endures through her compassionate work at Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust, where she supported vulnerable patients during the 2020 lockdown, while Vian Mangrio's brilliance at Marsden Heights Community College continues to inspire her peers. Their loss reverberates through Reedley, a reminder of the enduring impact of 2 remarkable lives cut short on Colne Road. As of May 2025, there have been no significant updates on the case. Khan is currently in prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This concludes the tragic story from Burnley, a crime tale that reveals the depths of human greed and the strength of those left behind. On April 4, 2015, emergency services received a disturbing call from a local resident. A frightened man reported to the dispatcher that he went into his friend's living room to turn on the lights and check on him. However, when he went upstairs to the 2nd floor, he found blood everywhere. The caller said everything was covered in blood, and his injured friend was not breathing. When the police arrived, they were shocked to discover the brutal murder of 59-year-old Charles Taylor in the unincorporated community of Montgomery County. The crime scene was horrifying. Blood was splattered on the carpet, the walls, and the sofa where Charles lay, completely soaked in it. The violent nature of the crime suggested deep anger, The attackers seemed determined to not only kill Charles but also to inflict as much pain as possible by stabbing him repeatedly with a sharp knife. The investigation of the house revealed no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator was familiar with the residents and acted quickly. The forensic medical examination determined that Charles died from blunt force trauma to the back of his head, along with 31 stab wounds. Charles was known as a kind and generous individual. He had a strong relationship with his adult son. He cherished his 2 grandchildren and daughter-in-law, Amanda Taylor. This is the image of the family that people often see, leading them to believe everything was well. However, was this truly the reality within the Taylor family? The initial investigation progressed slowly because the police had few leads. They started by looking into Charles's friends and acquaintances but found no one who had a motive to harm him. Soon, a theory emerged suggesting that the culprit might be a family member of Taylor. Investigators caught a break when a crime blogger came forward with photos of Amanda Taylor taking selfies next to Charles's lifeless body. As a result, she was added to the wanted list. Amanda Barbara Nicole Taylor was born on March 27, 1991, in Christiansburg, Virginia. There is limited information about her childhood, but it was difficult because both of her parents were incarcerated. Amanda faced many personal challenges as a young girl. Her involvement in crime began after she met Mariah Roebuck. The two of them frequently got into trouble together. On October 23, 2005, when they were only 12 years old, Amanda and Mariah stole a car and ran away from home, leading to charges of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In early April 2006, Amanda was charged with disorderly conduct at her middle school for loudly expressing her hatred for the school and its students, including making threats. This incident was much more serious than typical teenage behavior and is just a small part of Amanda's legal troubles. In 9th grade, she began dating Rex Taylor, who was 2 years her senior. They shared the same birthday, March 27th, which they saw as a meaningful connection. Amanda dropped out of school when she found out she was pregnant. She and Rex got married and had a son, but becoming a mother did not curb Amanda's criminal behavior. Amanda Taylor's married life was marked by numerous legal troubles. Her police record expanded significantly with reports of another attempted escape after stealing a vehicle, a conviction for alcohol possession, several domestic disputes, and a charge for holding a controlled substance. Her husband, Rex Taylor, also came from a troubled background. Although they were devoted to each other, Rex faced serious challenges with addiction and depression, having been addicted to banned substance since he was 15. They had a daughter. At one point, it seemed Amanda had turned her life around, becoming a dedicated mother and wife. This was in contrast to many young American women who expressed themselves through piercings, tattoos, and social media selfies. However, Amanda and Rex's relationship was far from typical. They obsessively studied the lives of infamous serial criminals and even corresponded with them while they were in prison. Amanda began to fantasize about joining the ranks of criminals herself, but before she could pursue that dark path, tragedy struck. Their marriage was complicated by Amanda's fears of Rex's infidelity. In April 2014, they separated. Rex returned to the family home, where he resumed using banned substance. Tragically, 4 months later, his lifeless body was found in a shed on their property. He had taken his own life on the day of their child's 7th birthday. After Amanda's husband passed away, she occasionally stayed with her mother and her friend Mariah. During her time with Mariah, she also formed a friendship with Sean Ball, a member of the Roebuck family. On March 27, 2015, which was her birthday and her late husband's birthday, Amanda visited Rex's grave and attempted to take her own life. Fortunately, she was saved and admitted to a psychiatric hospital due to her troubling thoughts and actions that posed a risk to herself and others. Despite her mother wanting her to stay for a longer period of treatment, Amanda was released back home shortly after. Once Amanda returned home, her mental state deteriorated further. As a result, Mariah and her husband decided that it was best for Amanda to move out. They also asked Sean Ball to leave, as he had developed strong feelings for Amanda. Feeling abandoned by her friends during this challenging time, Amanda began to entertain dark thoughts about killing. This disturbing mindset was influenced by her late husband, Rex Taylor, whom she wanted to honor and make proud. Amanda believed that fulfilling this twisted sense of duty required taking someone's life. Rex had a fascination with serial killers and had even formed close connections with some during his lifetime. Imagine stepping outside your house one morning to check your mailbox and discovering an envelope addressed to you from a famous serial criminal who was caught in 1980. Inside the envelope, you would feel relieved to find a birthday card for your young child and a handwritten note. Some might say that receiving such a message is worrying. Regardless, for most people, getting anything in the mail from a serial criminal would be unsettling, but not for the Taylor family. Rex's behavior and his readiness to communicate with known serial criminals, along with Amanda's fascination with crime, have been underscored by disturbing details found in her past social media posts. In multiple posts, Amanda praised mass murderers and their violent acts, specifically mentioning Timothy McVeigh, who orchestrated the largest terrorist attack in U.S. history, as well as Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the shooters responsible for the Columbine High School massacre. She expressed a desire to emulate these cruel criminals and chose to embark on a criminal path herself. On April 4, 2015, Amanda went to Charles's home in Montgomery County, Virginia, with Sean, who had picked her up in his car earlier that day. Together, the two purchased a bayonet-shaped knife. They also brought a tire iron that Sean had hidden in his pants, along with several guns, including 2 pistols and a rifle. These weapons had been stolen from Sean's parents' home. Amanda later admitted that they had gone to Charles's home with the intention of killing him. During the visit, the conversation turned to Rex Taylor, Amanda's late husband, who had committed to end one's own life in August 2014. Amanda blamed Charles for Rex's end one's own life, believing that he was responsible for Rex's banned substance abuse, which had become particularly problematic in the 2 years prior to his death. While Charles was sitting on the sofa, Amanda began stabbing him repeatedly while standing over him. Charles reached for the knife. As he did so, Sean swung the tire iron and struck him 5 or 6 times, while Amanda continued to stab him. Charles's autopsy later revealed that he had been stabbed 31 times and had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Some of the stab wounds were so forceful that they completely penetrated his neck and arms. For Amanda, this was a personal act of revenge. She finally stopped when her anger began to fade, and the room was covered in blood. However, she went even further by taking a selfie next to his body and sharing it on her social media accounts. Later that day, Amanda's mother received a troubling phone call from an unknown number. To her shock, it was Amanda's voice on the line, crying as she expressed her deep love for her mother and how much she appreciated everything her mom had done for her. Amidst her tears, Amanda admitted that she had done something very serious. Sensing the urgency of the situation, her mother pleaded for her to come home. However, Amanda declined. The authorities were taken aback by her social media posts, which suggested she was surprisingly proud of her actions related to the incident. In hopes of addressing the situation quickly, the police issued an arrest warrant for her. However, by that time, Amanda and Sean had already fled. They weren't just fleeing, they were looking for their next victim. After Amanda committed her first crime, which she believed was flawless, she felt an uncontrollable urge to keep killing. At a gas station, they took out cash, filled the car with gas, and headed towards Tennessee. Sean urged Amanda to pause and hide for a while, but having experienced the thrill of violence, Amanda was set on committing another crime. They bought ammunition at a sporting goods store and then stayed overnight at a motel in Tennessee. The next day, they continued their journey to carry out Amanda's violent plan. While driving, Amanda spotted 2 young girls at a rest stop on Blue Ridge Parkway, whom she saw as potential victims. She informed Sean that she intended to bring the girls to the car so he could shoot them. They needed money, and he consented. Amanda went outside to lead the girls to the car, but when she brought them inside, Sean refused to shoot them. Enraged, Amanda got back in the car and drove away, unable to calm her anger. She stopped in the driveway and confronted Sean, who was now her target. Amanda pulled a revolver from the glove compartment, got out of the car, and approached the passenger side where Sean sat with his eyes closed in fear. Anger overwhelmed her, but then she noticed a jogger nearby. In a sudden move, she aimed the gun at him and fired. Luckily, she missed, and the gunshot startled Sean open his eyes. Realizing the threat he faced, he saw the revolver aimed at him. Amanda warned him that before she killed him, she wanted him to know she only used him for the gun and the car. Then, she pulled the trigger, shooting Sean in the face. Amanda took a picture of Sean's bloody face to share on social media and then drove away, leaving him bleeding from a gunshot wound on the side of the road. Now she was on the run by herself. The police were searching for her, yet Amanda continued to post updates online. In her next post, she confessed to taking Sean's life during a traffic stop in a field. She shared a photo of a silver revolver resting in her lap on Instagram, captioning it with what felt like a suicide note, "Okay, it's about that time. I'm going to find my husband in hell and finally find peace. I love you, Mom, and my beautiful children. I know you will provide them the life I could never give. I will finally be free." The police were closely monitoring Amanda's account in hopes of locating her, and they succeeded. Surveillance cameras from gas stations along the route taken by the white SUV in which she fled helped the police track her down. Additionally, cell tower signals pinpointed Amanda's location on a North Carolina state highway. Patrol officers spotted a white SUV traveling east on I-40 near Asheville. When they attempted to pull her over, Amanda resisted arrest. Law enforcement was on high alert, aware that she was armed and considered very dangerous. After a 2-mile stretch filled with strategically placed spikes, the chaos finally came to an end. Amanda was taken into custody around 8 the next morning. Police officers pulled her out of the car and handcuffed her. Meanwhile, paramedics discovered Sean, injured, on the side of the road. In the interrogation room, Amanda acted indifferently, sipping a soft drink and playing with her hair until the captain and another detective entered. When questioned, she waived her right to remain silent and confessed to everything. She seemed surprisingly comfortable in the presence of the investigators. Amanda was informed that Sean was not dead. The bullet had passed through his jaw, causing him to faint from the pain but leaving him with no lasting injuries. In a startling statement, Amanda expressed her desire to go to the death chamber. In a surprising twist, Amanda changed her plea to not guilty in court. During the trial, she described her crime in detail, claiming she was justified in killing Charles, who had taken Rex away from her. Initially, she was furious with Rex, but her anger soon turned toward his father. Amanda confessed that she wanted Charles to feel the same pain she had endured. She claimed she killed Charles because she held him responsible for her husband Rex's death. According to Amanda, when Charles mentioned Rex again, she looked at him and began stabbing him. She acknowledged that she felt a strange happiness during those moments of violence. Ultimately, Amanda unleashed all her pent-up hatred and anger. By not pleading guilty, she sought attention and an opportunity to discuss her case. The investigator found Amanda's explanation appalling, especially since she likened her feelings about the crime to a happy memory. On November 12, 2015, Amanda Taylor was convicted of first-degree murder for the brutal killing of Charles Taylor. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the judge describing her as the embodiment of evil. As part of a plea bargain, Sean Ball acknowledged that he did not deserve sympathy and expressed deep remorse for his actions. Yet, he carries a constant guilt, pondering what led to his situation. Sean Ball accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder, receiving a 60-year sentence with 19 years suspended, requiring him to serve 41 years. He expressed deep remorse for his role in the crime. Amanda recently appealed her conviction but was unsuccessful. She mentioned that she plans to take her appeal to the Supreme Court if needed. While Amanda is not a repeat offender, she gained a reputation as a killer selfie taker. During this time, she surprisingly gave a phone interview to a local reporter, where she compared the experience of being stabbed to riding a roller coaster. Amanda Taylor committed a serious crime, and many people who knew her described her as a dark and troubling individual who had been obsessed with death, crime, and serial offenders since she was young. Her social media accounts were filled with disturbing images of death scenes. Love can indeed be blind, but sometimes it borders on insanity. In some instances, it is so blind that it prevents one from recognizing the cruelty directed at loved ones. This can lead to truly horrific outcomes. Maya Chappell was born in March 2020. Her mother was Dana Carr, and her father was James Chappell. Dana herself came from a dysfunctional family, where both of her parents struggled with alcohol abuse. Her father was cruel, often beat both his wife and daughter. All of this left a serious mark on Dana's soul. She ran away from her family as soon as she could provide for herself. This decision likely came just in time. Dana's father was convicted of murder. He ended up in prison, while his 17-year-old daughter was in a relationship with James Chappell, who was already 21. Many believed that Dana was too immature for a serious relationship, marriage, and especially motherhood, but she desperately needed love. Additionally, having a boyfriend was an opportunity for her to escape her dangerous family. They got married and were preparing for the birth of their child. Unfortunately, the relationship with James did not allow the young mother to attain what she wanted. Soon after Maya was born, Dana broke up with James in early summer 2022 because she had begun dating Michael Damon. Their relationship developed rapidly, and by the end of August 2022, they had moved in together. Despite James's efforts to distance himself from Dana, Maya stayed with her mother. The new boyfriend was unemployed, and Dana worked almost 7 days a week to support the entire family. Money was tight, so they saved on everything, including childcare and kindergarten. When Dana went to work, she left her daughter with her boyfriend. The girl's father rarely saw his daughter due to the restrictions imposed by Dana. All of this occurred in the small town of Shotton Colliery, UK. Everything seemed to be proceeding normally, and nothing foreshadowed trouble until one day. On September 28, 2022, around 10 a.m., Michael's stepfather stopped by their house. By this time, Dana and Michael had been living together for a month. According to Dana, everything was fine. However, when he arrived, Maya was acting very restlessly, as if she were afraid of Michael. When asked about his suspicious behavior, Michael explained that he had had a dispute over the phone with several banks that were supposed to give him a loan but refused. Things were not going well for him. He tried to solve his financial problems, managed to convince his stepfather that everything was fine and that there was no need to worry. After his stepfather left, Michael began trying to apply for benefits, contacted several more banks and organizations to secure a loan. However, they also denied him due to his lack of employment and income. Later, Michael called Dana, claimed that her daughter had lost consciousness and was having difficulty breathing. Following this call, Michael contacted the UK emergency services to 999. When paramedics and police arrived at the house, they found Maya in critical condition. She was taken to the Great North Children's Hospital, where she remained unconscious as doctors desperately fought to save her life for the next 2 days. Unfortunately, Maya died in the hospital. An autopsy was performed, revealing multiple injuries to Maya's brain, including severe trauma consistent with violent shaking. Medical experts determined that Michael Damon had likely shaken Maya forcefully, contributing to the fatal brain injuries. 5 witnesses stated that these injuries could have resulted from child abuse. The doctors who treated Maya were shocked by the extent of her injuries. She had extensive bruising all over her body, but it was impossible to determine the exact sequence of events leading to her condition. Even in her intimate areas, a large bruise and marks in various stages of healing were found, although there were no signs of sexual assault. Based on the condition of the bruises, it appeared that most of the injuries had been inflicted on September 28. Dana and Michael were questioned separately. Both denied any abuse towards Maya, offered several explanations. They stated that Maya was very energetic, frequently running and falling, which they said was why she had so many bruises. However, doctors disagreed with their claims, stating that it was impossible for the child to have gotten into such a condition on her own. Detectives began investigating the circumstances related to Maya's death. Family members of Michael and Dana reported that Maya had started developing bruises shortly after they began living together. The first bruises were discovered on August 26. On that day, neighbors saw Maya while walking with their children, and it was apparent that she had marks on her head, which she was trying to hide with her hair. The following day, They met with relatives, including Michael's family, who also noticed that Maya was hurt. Dana and Michael explained that Maya had fallen from a slide, and Dana supported this explanation. Although they managed to calm everyone down, it was difficult to believe their story, especially since the bruise was not only on Maya's head but also inside her left ear. It's hard to imagine how such an injury could occur accidentally. Additionally, there were small bruises around her jaw that looked like they were caused by fingers. On September 5th, Michael called his girlfriend at work to inform her that Maya was having trouble breathing. When Dana requested time off to come home, everything appeared to be fine, but new marks had appeared on Maya's body. Michael quickly brushed them off as injuries from accidental falls in the yard where they had been playing while their mother worked. The next day, when Dana took Maya out again, several acquaintances pointed out a noticeable cut on her nose. A few days later, Maya had a split lip. Each time, the explanations were similar: she was running, fell, and got hurt. Maya was briefly entrusted to Dana's mother so her grandmother could spend time with her. That evening, while bathing Maya, her grandmother noticed bruises all over her body. She took a photo of the bruises and sent it to Dana, who then advised her to take Maya to the hospital. Following this advice, she went to the hospital. When the doctor inquired about the bruises, she shared the usual explanation that Maya was clumsy and very active, often bumping into things both indoors and outdoors. The doctor accepted her explanation, and no one reported the situation to the authorities. On September 14th, Maya visited a kindergarten near their home for the first time. The purpose of this visit was to help her adjust to the new environment. Maya enjoyed her time there, but unfortunately, she never returned. Dana, her caregiver, encountered questions from the staff about the marks on Maya's body, which led her to stop bringing Maya to the kindergarten. The teachers even tried to convince Dana to let Maya return, but she declined, saying that Maya either didn't want to go or was unwell. On September 15th, Maya was scheduled to be given to her biological father, James. However, Dana refused to comply, claiming that Maya was sick. Instead, she left the girl with her mother and stepfather. Dana's mother took Maya to a relative who was a trained nurse. That day, they noticed a large, unusual bruise on Maya's buttocks. It had been concealed by her diaper, but once it was removed, the bruise was clearly visible. They asked Dana for an explanation, and she pointed to Michael, who claimed that Maya had bitten herself. This explanation seemed unlikely, so they decided to take some photos to document the odd injury. During a phone conversation with Dana, Michael repeatedly insisted that he was not at fault, even though no one had accused him of anything. Their behavior raised further suspicion. The following weekend, Maya visited her relatives and was observed with new injuries, including 4 bruises on her chest. What stood out most was the calm attitude of her mother, who insisted that the injuries were merely accidents. On September 27th, Maya had gotten another bruise while they were playing outside. Despite these concerning incidents, Dana remained unbothered and continued to go to work each day, leaving Maya alone with Michael. It later emerged that Dana had repeatedly lied to Maya's father, stepfather, mother, kindergarten teachers Maya's health. This deception was aimed at hiding the true person responsible for the bruises, whom detectives believed was Michael. After Maya died, Dana was the first to be questioned and consistently provided false information. To justify her lies, she created a story claiming she was pregnant during Maya's abuse and suffered a miscarriage due to stress when Maya died, which she described as emotional shock. This made it difficult to extract useful information from her. Meanwhile, Michael exhibited immature behavior. He initially blamed Dana's mother for abuse, then his stepfather, and ultimately Maya's biological father. However, detectives were convinced that the ongoing abuse of Maya was linked to him, as her bruises appeared specifically when she was left alone with Michael. The reason for the abuse was quickly understood. Michael was venting his frustration on Maya. This frustration stemmed from his financial troubles and the threats he faced for failing to pay his debts. On September 28th, Michael had a particularly difficult day when banned substance dealers confronted him, claiming he owed them a large sum of money. These issues had been mounting for several months. They had been persistently pressing him for repayment. Although he was being followed, he had not yet suffered any physical harm. He managed to assure they once again that he would pay them soon. However, he actually did not have the necessary funds and was desperately trying to find a solution. Michael reached out to social services for assistance, but received no help. He then tried contacting banks, but to no avail. This continuous stream of bad news drove him to a breaking point, and he directed his anger towards the little girl. The incident deeply affected Maya's biological father, James. For the past 2 years, he believed he was trying to protect his daughter from her mother, Dana, whom he saw as unfit to care for his daughter. When Dana filed for divorce, she accused James of being aggressive and cruel, claiming their relationship was toxic. James was concerned that Dana might seek revenge, which could harm Maya. Although Dana could not prove her claims about her ex-husband's aggressive behavior, she was awarded primary custody of their daughter. James was only allowed to visit his daughter on weekends. Initially, Dana tried to restrict communication between James and their child, despite his legal visitation rights. She often found ways to prevent their interactions, avoid bringing their daughter to him. Consequently, James had very limited time with Maya. When he noticed bruises on Maya, he asked Dana about them, but she repeatedly made excuses about accidents. Eventually, she began to limit his visits with Maya even more to evade his questions. James believed that if Dana was not directly involved in the abuse of Maya, she at least supported her boyfriend, who probably was involved. From the start, James suspected something was off about Michael, but Dana presented Maya's relationship with Michael as nearly perfect. She claimed that Michael treated Maya like his own daughter, that they spent all their free time together, going for walks, watching movies, and playing games. When James first noticed bruises on Maya, he immediately checked Michael's name in police databases, suspecting he might have a criminal history. To his surprise, Michael had no record. Despite Dana's reassurances, James witnessed changes in Maya's behavior during their brief visits. She had become disobedient, extremely anxious, cried often, and struggled to sleep. He associated these changes with the negative influence of Dana and Michael, but he lacked concrete evidence. One day, when James went to pick up his daughter from the home she shared with Dana and Michael, he found broken windows. Both claimed that some troublemakers were responsible for the situation, but it soon became clear that the damage was caused by dealers trying to intimidate Michael. On James's next visit, he saw that the house had been vandalized with paint. When James suspected his daughter was being abused, he wanted to collect evidence to formally report the situation. Unfortunately, during this time, Dana severely restricted his communication with Maya. She frequently canceled planned visits, claiming to be sick or saying Maya didn't want to see her father. This left James powerless to protect Maya. It soon became clear that these actions were intentional, aimed at allowing Maya's bruises to heal and preventing any inquiries about them. When Maya finally got to visit her father, Dana continued to make excuses for the new injuries, stating that Maya had been with her grandparents for several days, thus shifting the blame onto them for not watching the girl properly. Unfortunately, James faced challenges when trying to communicate with Maya because of her young age. He wanted to talk about her bruises, but every time he brought it up, she seemed to gesture as if something were breaking and simply said, "D." It wasn't until later that James understood she was referring to Michael by a nickname derived from his last name, Damon. Unfortunately, this information came too late to charge him with abusing the little girl. During the investigation, a lot of relevant information emerged from examining Michael's emails and phone records. It became clear that Dana was unaware of the serious situation and believed Michael's false narratives. He often claimed that Maya had fallen while playing on the playground or bumped into something at home. However, such incidents had never occurred in Maya's life before meeting him. These sudden changes in her behavior didn't raise any alarms for her biological mother, who continued to trust what she was told. The detectives questioned why Dana, considering the strange injuries and her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, had not reached out to a medical center, the police, or other professionals. Dana explained that her lack of action was due to her inexperience. When family members began to ask uncomfortable questions about Maya's injuries, Michael responded by saying that if they didn't stop prying into their affairs, he would no longer babysit Maya. Meanwhile, Dana tried to reassure her boyfriend, claiming that she believed him and rationalizing his actions to protect their relationship. Rather than confronting her doubts about Michael, she continued to defend him. The conversation concluded with Dana expressing her love for him, stating that she trusted him and wanted him to keep babysitting her daughter. Despite being shown pictures of her injured daughter, Dana claimed that without her boyfriend's supervision, Maya would have suffered even more. James was taken aback by his ex-wife's apparent ignorance, but he felt powerless to change the situation. Throughout their relationship, Michael repeatedly assured Dana that he would never harm her daughter, and she never think ill of him. On the day of the incident, when Michael messaged Dana that Maya was choking, Dana concluded their brief exchange by expressing her love for him and her desire not to lose him, showing little concern for her daughter's well-being. When the child was discovered alive at home, there were immediate and serious suspicions of domestic violence. At the medical center, doctors found numerous bruises on Maya's body in various stages of healing, including what looked suspiciously like bite marks. The autopsy revealed that the child had endured repeated beatings with a blunt object, likely inflicted by an adult's fists. Most of the injuries were concentrated around her head and abdomen, suggesting she may have been violently thrown to the floor. The surgeon who attempted to save Maya noted that her injuries resembled those from a fall from a significant height or a high-speed car crash. Only after hearing these alarming assessments did Dana begin to have suspicions. However, detectives believed Dana was feigning ignorance, as Maya's injuries were the result of consistent abuse from Michael, a situation she likely was aware of. Others around her had been discussing the matter and urging her to recognize the reality of the situation. Michael was interrogated but did not confess to any wrongdoing. After Maya died at the medical center, Michael Damon was charged with murder. During a second interrogation, where he was the main suspect, he continued to deny any guilt. He portrayed his relationship with Maya as loving and claimed he never yelled or swore at her. Michael said he noticed Maya was unwell on the day she stopped breathing. They had been playing Xbox together, and then she went to her bedroom while he continued to play. About 10 minutes later, he heard a loud thud from her room. Upon entering, he found Maya lying motionless on the floor. It looked like she had fallen out of bed twice. He immediately noticed Maya's irregular breathing and called Dana at home, then contacted emergency services. This explanation seemed unconvincing. The detectives interviewed a young man who had visited their home earlier that morning. He was disturbed by Maya's behavior and initially wanted to take her with him. He described her as crying, calling for her mother, looking frightened, and even trying to hide when she saw Michael, indicating she felt uncomfortable around him. When Michael spoke to the young man about the situation, Michael assured him that everything was fine and that there was nothing to worry about. Nevertheless, the young man managed to record a video that showed Maya's unusual behavior, which was later presented in court to contradict Michael's statements. The detectives uncovered numerous calls related to Michael's financial issues and were alarmed by their timing. Michael had temporarily left Maya alone to request loan on his mobile phone, showing a complete disregard for her well-being. Investigators also discovered that Michael was unfaithful to his girlfriend, Dana, as he had a profile on an online dating site and date other women while in a relationship with her. Additionally, Michael was taking steroids along with other prohibited substances, which likely exacerbated his aggressive behavior and emotional instability, leading him to lose control at times. This situation caused trouble for Maya. Dana was ultimately arrested, charged with cruelty toward her daughter for her indifference to the domestic abuse, and chose to stand by Michael instead of leaving him. In October 2023, the trial began. During the trial, Dana expressed that she had been so infatuated with her boyfriend that it blinded her to the reality of the situation. She failed to recognize the harm Michael was causing her daughter and did not believe her loved ones when they tried to warn her. Dana said she didn't fully grasp the consequences of Michael's actions. Many suspected that she was merely trying to avoid prison. During the hearing, the defense attorney attempted to present Dana as a victim of long-term familial abuse, particularly from her father. He highlighted that she had experienced violence throughout her childhood. Ultimately, the attorney's arguments might have evoked some sympathy from the jury, but they did not excuse her lack of concern for Maya. During the trial, Dana expressed discomfort at being in the same room with Michael. She contradicted her previous statements with another falsehood. Initially, she claimed to have suffered a miscarriage after Maya's death. Now, she escalated her claims, stating that she had been pregnant with twins fathered by Michael and that their fate also ended tragically. Dana asserted that she had an abortion upon realizing Michael had killed her daughter and wanted nothing to do with him or his children. This claim was swiftly debunked by prosecutors, who noted the absence of any medical documentation to support her allegations of pregnancy, miscarriage, or abortion. End of trial. Maya's mother, Dana Carr, 24, was convicted of leaving the child to die and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Subsequently, Michael Damon's trial began. Unlike Dana, he chose not to testify in his defense. His lawyer argued that Michael lacked sadistic intent, premeditation, or planning regarding Maya's death, claiming it was an accident. Despite these weak justifications, Michael was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. However, the court allowed for the possibility of parole after 20 years. Maya's funeral was held on November 4, 2022. Following this heartbreaking event, James posted a final message for his daughter on social media. In it, he said goodbye, expressed his sorrow for not being able to protect her, and promised that they would be reunited one day. Addiction can completely dominate a person's mind and will, leading them to engage in disturbing, harmful behaviors. This dependency can stem from various sources, such as alcohol, banned substance, gambling, or even unhealthy relationships, and its impacts can be equally damaging. While some people eventually recognize that they have become trapped by their addictions, many others ignore the problem. Unfortunately, this denial often leads to a worsening situation. The tragic story of Donna Munda and Ghulam Munda is not an isolated case. In 2005, it sent shockwaves through the peaceful town of Hermitage. They was well known and admired by locals, almost like celebrities. Ghulam was a respected physician who owned his clinic, while Donna was exceptionally beautiful and nearly 24 years younger than him. To everyone who knew them, they appeared to have a perfect and successful relationship. However, on a warm day in May, a single gunshot shattered this facade, revealing a much darker reality marked by betrayal, dependency, and greed. Ghulam grew up in the slums of Gujarat, India. From a young age, he faced the harsh realities of poverty and hunger. These tough conditions shaped his strong character, motivated him to escape poverty and create a better life for himself. He worked hard, focused on excellence, and aspiring to become a doctor. After completing high school, Ghulam was accepted into a medical university, where he quickly became one of the top students. His hard work paid off when he was offered an internship at a prestigious clinic in the United States. There, he worked in the urology department and quickly gained a reputation as a promising young specialist with a bright future. After his internship, Ghulam received an attractive job offer and chose to remain in the U.S. He also began applying for U.S. citizenship. By the mid-1970s, he had moved to Hermitage, Pennsylvania, a small town with a population of just over 16,000. There, he opened his own clinic specializing in urological care. His career quickly flourished. Ghulam became a top professional, utilizing advanced technology and the latest equipment in his practice. His clinic gained a reputation as one of the best in the state. He accepted the most difficult and seemingly hopeless cases, attracting patients from both near and far, including overseas. Dr. Ghulam was well respected not only for his medical skills but also for his kindness. He frequently provided free medical care and often paid for expensive medications for patients who couldn't afford them. His compassion was rooted in his own challenging childhood, which motivated him to help others in need. With a prosperous medical practice, Ghulam enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. He purchased an opulent home in a prestigious area and embraced a life filled with enjoyment. He believed in making the most of life and investing in what made him happy, such as gourmet food, traveling, luxury watches, rare collectibles, high-end cars, and spending time with attractive companions. In his 40s, Ghulam was still single when he noticed a young woman named Donna walking down the street and fell for her immediately. Donna was 24 years younger than him. She came from a religious Catholic family and had just graduated from high school when she met him. At first, she was hesitant about his interest, but over time, she accepted his generous gifts and let him pursue her. Donna's family struggled financially and couldn't afford a prestigious college education. When Ghulam found out about her situation, he offered to pay for her tuition because she wanted to work in healthcare. He supported her journey to become a registered nurse and later funded her master's degree in anesthesiology. Donna and her partner's romantic, Ghulam, relationship started several years after their initial meeting. Interestingly, even though they had strong religious values, Donna's parents accepted their relationship. They appreciated the kind, generous doctor who had helped support their daughter's education and overall well-being. Donna later became a highly skilled nurse anesthetist, secured a job at a prominent medical center. Ghulam continued to encourage her ambitions, supported her career advancement. They lived in Ghulam's luxurious home, where he gave Donna to an expensive car, lavish jewelry, and trips to fancy vacation destinations. When Donna turned 30, Ghulam, who was 54 at the time, proposed to her, and she accepted. They celebrated their engagement with an extravagant wedding ceremony that had over 150 guests, including family, friends, and many of Ghulam's business associates. It appeared that they were on their way to a long, happy life together. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Donna and Ghulam gained fame as local celebrities and were probably the richest people in their town. They enjoyed a luxurious life, traveling frequently, and the doctor generously indulged his much younger wife. They frequently attended charity galas and was always spotted together at public events. Donna chose to prioritize her career and took her time before starting a family. Ghulam supported her decision without any pressure. Many saw Donna as cheerful, friendly, and lively, which was the image she projected, until tragedy started to turn her life upside down. At 37 years old, Donna lost her father after a long illness, which hit her hard. She had always had a close bond with him, referring to herself as a daddy's girl and seeing him as her main source of strength. After he died, Donna became deeply depressed. She isolated herself from others. Ghulam did his best to support her, fulfilling all her wishes, including a trip to Hawaii to help her feel better. However, nothing seemed to work except for antidepressants, which she started taking in larger doses. Donna immersed herself in work, hoping to find solace in her daily routine, but it didn't truly alleviate her suffering. A few years later, she was diagnosed with a kidney condition that caused intense back pain. Even though her husband was a well-known urologist, he couldn't fully relieve her discomfort. The treatments only offered temporary relief, and her symptoms kept coming back, often worse than before. In her desperation, Donna started to rely heavily on strong pain medication. She began secretly taking doses from her workplace, where she was responsible for managing and administering medications. This made it easy for her to take small amounts without being noticed. She would quietly use portions meant for patients, just enough so that no one would realize. Together with her antidepressants, the prescription painkillers dulled her physical and emotional pain. Donna felt abandoned by the world and overwhelmed by her struggles. As a result, she began to distance herself from Ghulam, even though he genuinely cared for her. Things quickly deteriorated. She became increasingly dependent on her medications, to the point where she could not function without them. This led her to raise her dosages and steal more often. Eventually, her behavior attracted attention. She was caught in the act, and there was no way to deny it. Her dismissal from the clinic was shocking, and she faced multiple criminal charges. Ghulam quickly intervened to defend his wife, managed the situation to safeguard her reputation. Thanks to his actions, their friends and family never learned about Donna's problem. Rather than facing jail time, she paid a hefty fine and committed to rehabilitation at a specialized center. Ghulam chose the facility himself and organized Donna's stay, informing relatives, neighbors, and friends that she was on vacation. No one doubted him. He stayed calm, convincing, continued to appear cheerful and friendly. At the rehab center, Donna, who is now in her 40s, met a younger man named Damian Bradford, who was 23 years old. Damien had a history of multiple offenses for distributing illegal substances and ended up in rehab after a serious overdose that almost killed him. Despite their age difference, Donna and Damien quickly became very close, spent a lot of time together. They faced similar challenges. Although their relationship was unexpected, their bond deepened rapidly. What started as simple conversations turned into a passionate affair. Donna's husband was nearing 70 years old. Due to his age and health problems, their physical relationship had significantly diminished. In contrast, Damien was young, energetic, fit, and undeniably attractive. He dedicated a lot of time to the gym, often used steroids and various supplements to maintain his physique. It's unclear why Damien was attracted to a woman 2 decades his senior, but for Donna, he felt like a breath of fresh air, rekindling emotions she thought were long gone. She fully embraced this connection, quickly became emotionally invested. Even though the rehabilitation center had strict rules prohibiting romantic relationships among patients, the two secretly began dating. They found secluded spots to meet, such as storage rooms and restrooms. The thrill of being caught only seemed to strengthen their connection. Donna became so invested in the relationship that she couldn't envision her life without him. Their romance continued after they left the rehab facility. Damien was a caring partner who gave Donna plenty of attention, called her sweet names, and truly enjoyed making her feel valued. He may have developed genuine feelings for Donna, a sophisticated and self-assured woman who clearly looked after herself. At this point, Donna was not working anymore but had complete access to her husband's bank accounts and could spend as she pleased. Ghulam never scrutinized her spending or asked about her expenses. Taking advantage of this, Donna started showering Damien with lavish gifts, designer clothes, and accessories, while also covering all of his living expenses. She even rented a cozy apartment for them to meet privately. As a result, Damien became financially dependent on his wealthy partner, but neither of them appeared to have any concerns about it. When warned about his wife's affair, Ghulam had long suspected that something was off and noticed changes in Donna's behavior, but he had decided not to confront her about it. He realized that she was much younger and had emotional and physical needs that he could no longer fulfill. Gradually, he accepted that their passion had faded. Instead of reacting angrily, he calmly asked Donna if they should consider ending their relationship. Donna was shocked to learn that Ghulam knew about her affair. She explained that it was merely a temporary distraction that happened during a tough period in her life. She had met the younger man while in rehab, when she was feeling vulnerable and needed support. He seemed to understand her struggles better than anyone else. Despite this, she assured Ghulam that he was still the person she loved, promised to end her relationship with the younger man, emphasizing that he didn't truly matter to her. Ghulam felt moved by her words. He chose to trust her, forgave her, and decided they could move forward together as if nothing had happened. Damien had become Donna's overwhelming dependency, which she couldn't easily escape. She felt a strong attraction to him and, in his presence, experienced feelings of youth, desire, and genuine care. Her thoughts were focused on one main goal, eliminating the obstacle to her happiness, her husband. The affair continued at the apartment she had rented for Damien. Although they were more cautious now, Ghulam believed their relationship was over, while Donna planned to maintain it. When they couldn't meet in person, they stayed in constant contact, calling up to 20 times a day and exchanging hundreds of messages. Donna had no plans to let go of her boyfriend. Donna had selfish reasons for not wanting a divorce. She feared losing her financial stability. Before marrying Ghulam, they signed a prenuptial agreement that would limit her settlement to $250,000 if they separated. However, after Ghulam found out about her infidelity, he tried to keep the situation under control and offered to raise her settlement to $1 million. Donna turned down the offer, persuading Ghulam that she still loved him and wished to save their marriage. In reality, though, Ghulam's wealth had increased to nearly $12 million. Motivated by greed, Donna wanted everything, immediate access to wealth so she and Damien could live the way they wanted without restrictions. Every time they met, Donna portrayed Ghulam as a controlling tyrant who emotionally suffocated her and treated her like an object. She wanted Damien to see her husband as an enemy who deserved revenge for the emotional pain he supposedly caused her. Her manipulative stories worked well. A dark plan began to form in Donna's troubled mind, one she intended to execute with the help of her young lover. She believed that since Ghulam was much older and had several chronic health issues, his time was running out anyway. So, she thought, why not hasten the inevitable? To Donna, this seemed like the ideal solution. No one would disrupt her new life, and she would legally inherit all of Ghulam's assets, properties, and wealth as his surviving spouse. She shared her plan with Damien, offering him half of Ghulam's fortune in exchange for his help with a problem. Damien quickly agreed. The promise of a large payout clouded his judgment. Together, they began devising the crime. People who knew Ghulam were aware that he often carried a large amount of cash in his wallet. He frequently joked that anyone who tried to rob him would leave satisfied. Donna and Damien decided to exploit this, planning the crime to appear as a failed mugging that escalated into a tragic event. Developing the plan took nearly 2 months, as Donna and her accomplice carefully considered every detail to avoid mistakes. During this time, Donna portrayed the perfect devoted wife. She stayed close to her husband, accompanied him everywhere, and made sure no one suspected any issues in their marriage. Friends and neighbors genuinely thought they were a happy couple, and even Ghulam was convinced of it. Their initial attempt to execute the plan did not go well. Damien was meant to ambush Ghulam as he left the hospital and headed to his car in the parking lot. However, the area was crowded with people, prompting Damien to back out due to the fear of too many witnesses. It took them another month to devise a new strategy. This time, they aimed to attack on a deserted road where no one would be present to intervene. The plan was straightforward. Damien would follow their car at a safe distance, and Donna would stop at a designated location, pretending there was a medical emergency. They set the date for Friday, May 13, 2005. On that day, Dr. Ghulam planned to visit a neighboring state to look at a house he wanted to buy as a wedding gift for his nephew, Farouk Munda. Donna offered to go with him, but her 72-year-old mother, Dorothy Smouse, who was visiting at the time, insisted on joining. Donna tried to talk her out of it, but Ghulam didn't see any issue with her coming along and agreed to let his mother-in-law participate. Damien, dressed entirely in black and wearing ski goggles to conceal his identity, waited in his car for a message from Donna indicating that their vehicle had left the house. Once he received the signal, he followed the predetermined route, maintaining a safe distance behind. After stopping to refuel, Donna took over driving to keep control over their timing. While traveling along a deserted highway, she pretended to feel ill and pulled over, claiming she needed to take some medication. At that moment, a black Volkswagen approached from behind. A man in ski goggles jumped out, ran to the passenger side where Ghulam was sitting, pointed a gun at him, and demanded his wallet. Ghulam complied without resistance, handed over his wallet. However, as soon as the attacker received the money, he shot Ghulam in the head and quickly returned to his vehicle, driving away rapidly. Ghulam died instantly from the gunshot. Donna then called emergency services, crying and screaming as she begged them to save her husband. She acted so convincingly like a distraught widow that, at first, no one suspected she could have been involved in the incident. Inconsistencies in the testimonies appeared quickly. Right from the initial interviews, it was evident that something was not right. Donna stated she didn't see the attacker or his vehicle, everything happened too quickly, and she was in shock. In contrast, her mother provided a different account. She claimed she saw both the shooter and the car clearly. According to her, the person who shot her son-in-law was a young black man driving a black Volkswagen. This assertion visibly upset Donna, who argued with her mother, insisting that she must have been mistaken. However, her mother remained firm and began to add more specific details. Donna contended that they had stopped the car because Ghulam requested it, while her mother claimed it was Donna who stopped the car, as illness. Investigators were also puzzled as to why the assailant only targeted one person while leaving 2 possible witnesses unharmed. 2 days after the incident, Dr. Ghulam's widow held a press conference where she answered reporters' questions with tears in her eyes. She made a heartfelt appeal to the public, urging anyone with information about the case to come forward and help with the investigation. Shortly after the press conference, the police received a phone call from a woman who claimed that Donna was actually the mastermind behind the incident and that she had been assisted by her lover, Damien Bradford. The caller also provided details such as the make and license plate number of Damien's car, as well as his home address. This caller considered herself to be Damien's fiancée. She had been closely monitoring the couple and shared all the information she had gathered. On the same day, police arrested Damien and searched his apartment. Although he had managed to get rid of the weapon, for some unknown reason, he kept the victim's wallet and brought it home. Inside the wallet, they found about $3,000 in cash, several bank cards belonging to Dr. Ghulam, and a photo of Donna. Authorities also discovered clothes with small blood stains that matched the doctor's. Damien was arrested and taken into custody. He mistakenly believed that his wealthy lover would help him and somehow secure his release. However, Donna, fearing for her own safety, chose to stay silent, hoping that all the blame would fall on Damien, especially since the evidence against him was overwhelming. When prosecutors told Damien that he might face the death penalty, he decided to cooperate with them in exchange for a shorter sentence. He disclosed the entire plan, provided text messages and documents, including evidence that Donna had purchased the car he was driving. In July 2007, Damien pleaded guilty to the crime and testified in court, explaining all the details of the scheme. Because he cooperated, he was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. Donna was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on September 21, 2007, for the murder for hire conviction, with an additional 360 months to run concurrently on the remaining charges. Despite Donna's numerous appeals, the court upheld the original sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Tallahassee Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Florida. After being released on supervised release in 2020, Damien Bradford was arrested again on July 29, 2022, following an altercation with state police at the Franklin Mini Mart in Aliquippa. During his struggle with an officer, Bradford fired a shot at the officer, hitting him in the leg. Damien was convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault on the officer, sentenced to 36.5 to 73 years in state prison in November 2023. In December of that year, the district court added a consecutive 10-year sentence for violating the terms of his supervised release. As of press time, Damien is serving his sentence at the Albion State Correctional Institution, located in Albion, Pennsylvania. The murder of Dr. Ghulam Munda on May 13, 2005, shattered the illusion of a perfect life in Hermitage, Pennsylvania, exposing a chilling tale of addiction and betrayal. Donna Munda, 23 years younger than her devoted husband, succumbed to a dependency on painkillers and an obsessive affair with Damien Bradford, leading her to orchestrate Ghulam's death for his $12 million estate. Ghulam's kindness and medical legacy endure in the community's memory, marked by tributes in 2025, while his tragic end serves as a stark warning of addiction's power to corrupt and destroy, urging greater vigilance to prevent such devastations.
Tynesha Stewart was born on July 10, 1987. Her childhood was not very peaceful. Her parents divorced when she was very young, and at just 6 years old, she faced her first major tragedy, the death of her father from a brain aneurysm. Following the divorce, her mother, Gail, remarried. Her stepfather was caring, and soon she became an older sister. Despite this difficult beginning, Tynesha grew up in a loving family that valued and supported one another. The family lived in Borders Village, Texas. As a child, she was organized, responsible, and did well in school. Like many teenagers, she struggled with self-doubt and insecurities, which led to conflicts with her stepfather. However, as she matured, she worked to overcome these challenges and turned her weaknesses into strengths. Tynesha was ambitious and dreamed of achieving something extraordinary in high school. Despite not enjoying sports, she made her mark as the basketball team's manager, helping lead the players outside of the game. Her talent for singing also shone through as she performed the national anthem at school games. Drawn to music, she even created a music group with friends at school. Balancing academics, extracurricular activities, and part-time work, Tynesha was highly driven According to the school director, she was one of the most ambitious students, taking steps every day to get closer to her dreams. Tynesha's ultimate goal was to attend Texas A&M University and become a construction engineer. Thanks to her excellent performance in high school, she earned scholarships totaling $40,000. Determination and effort helped her achieve many significant accomplishments. But it was also these very qualities that made the events that followed even more heartbreaking. Tynesha's first serious relationship was with Curtis, a handsome and popular middle school student. He adored her, treating her like the most important person in the world. They were inseparable, attending school events and even their graduation night together. Many admired their relationship and wished to be in Tynesha's shoes. However, as with many young love stories, their relationship was unpredictable. They experienced ups and downs, but remained close. Curtis cared deeply for Tynesha and always wanted the best for her. Everything changed during Tynesha's third year of college. While working part-time at a pizzeria, she met Timothy Wayne Shepard, a delivery driver. There was an instant connection between them. She ended her on-again, off-again relationship with Curtis and started dating Timothy. This time, the relationship felt more serious. However, there was a secret that Tynesha kept hidden for a long time. Timothy was 8 years older than her. He was 24, while she was only 16 when they started dating. Fearing her parents' disapproval, she didn't tell her parents about their age difference. Unaware of this, Tynesha's family welcomed Timothy with open arms. Her mother, stepfather, and sister grew to love him and thought the relationship might lead to marriage. Timothy became a regular presence at family gatherings and even bonded with Tynesha's younger sister. Eventually, they began living together. When Tynesha graduated from high school in 2006 and enrolled at Texas A&M University, she and Timothy decided to maintain a long-distance relationship. However, it didn't last. Not long after Tynesha left, Timothy's ex-girlfriend re-entered his life, and he rekindled his relationship with her. Tynesha was devastated by this betrayal, but she refused to let it hold her back. She remained focused on her ambitions and embraced the independence and opportunities that college life brought. At Texas A&M, she found herself surrounded by new friends, experiences, and possibilities. Meanwhile, Timothy's brief reconciliation with his ex-girlfriend was short-lived. He quickly realized it was a mistake and found himself missing Tynesha, desperate to win her back. He left everything behind and rushed to her college, where she was surprised by his unexpected arrival. They talked and discovered they still had feelings for each other. They decided to attempt a long-distance relationship once again. However, over time, Tynesha began to grow and change emotionally. She no longer wanted to hold on to the past, and during this period, she met Mark, a classmate her own age. Mark shared her thoughts and interests, and although a part of her heart still belonged to Timothy, she came to realize their romance was over. About 2 years later, Tynesha made a definitive decision. She decided to move on and began spending time with Mark. Their relationship started slowly, with friendship and a bit of flirting, as they enjoyed each other's company. During this time, Tynesha remained in touch with Timothy, hoping to maintain a friendship with him. In her mind, love and friendship could coexist. By March 2007, Tynesha had fully adjusted to student life. She was excited about what lay ahead and was genuinely happy. She eagerly counted the days until the spring holidays, anticipating reuniting with her friends from her hometown and attending a Beyoncé concert scheduled for March 15th in Houston. After the concert, Tynesha planned to visit South Padre Island before returning to campus. On the evening of March 14th, she and her friends prepared for the next day's event. The group of former classmates styled each other's hair, laughed until they cried, and reminisced about their school days. Tynesha planned to spend the night at her friend Lois's apartment. That evening, she called her mother to ask permission to borrow the car for the concert, and her mother happily agreed, not knowing this would be their last conversation. Tragically, she never made it to the concert. She went missing from Lois's apartment that night and stopped answering her phone. Lois grew alarmed, knowing Tynesha would never miss a Beyoncé concert. She had planned everything meticulously. When Tynesha didn't show up the next morning, March 15th, her friends panicked. Lois contacted Gail, Tynesha's mother, who had not heard from her daughter since the evening of March 14th. The family was immediately concerned, as Tynesha would never disappear without reason or leave them worried. Gail called Tynesha's friends and classmates, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. In a desperate attempt to learn more, Gail called Timothy, hoping he might know something. He admitted to speaking to Tynesha on the evening of Wednesday, March 14th, but had not seen her since. As it turned out, Wednesday was the night before the concert, meaning Timothy could have been the last person to have seen her. Unable to wait any longer, Gail decided to start her own investigation. She personally confronted Timothy, seeking answers. Although the family had liked Timothy when he and Tynesha were dating, Gail approached him with caution, sensing something she couldn't explain, an instinctive unease that grew stronger now that Tynesha was missing. Timothy explained that he had met with Tynesha on the night of March 14th, after she spent the evening with her friends at Lois's apartment. He picked her up, and they went to his place. However, around 3 a.m., Tynesha received a phone call. Timothy, consumed by jealousy, assumed it was Mark, her new boyfriend, and insisted on knowing why he was calling so late. She refused to discuss her relationship with Mark and left Timothy's apartment. Between 4 and 5 she walked away alone, on foot. On March 19th, after days of no contact, Gail reported her daughter's disappearance to law enforcement. Gail provided the authorities with a detailed description of Tynesha and all the known events leading to her disappearance. Tynesha, a 19 years old, standing 156 cm tall and weighing 54 kilograms, had black hair, brown eyes, and distinctive tattoos on her right thigh and back. The last person to see her, Lois, reported that she was wearing a white shirt and rainbow-colored pajamas at the time. Despite her mother, Gail's concerns, the police dismissed the situation, suggesting that, as an adult on spring break, she might have simply left without giving notice. They advised Gail to wait and check back after the weekend. However, Gail knew her daughter wouldn't just disappear without telling anyone. Tynesha had plans to attend a concert and return to her college classes. If she were going somewhere, she would have informed her family. Days passed without any updates, leaving the family to take action on their own. They distributed flyers, searched nearby areas, contacted hospitals and morgues, and spoke with Tynesha's friends and classmates, desperately hoping for any clue about her whereabouts. When classes resumed, Tynesha was still missing, raising concerns among her professors, who also tried to reach her. With each passing day, the family became more worried. Frustrated by the lack of action from authorities, the family organized a community meeting at the local Lutheran church, hoping to draw attention to Tynesha's disappearance. This effort finally gained traction when an assistant in the sheriff's office working in the missing persons department took an interest in the case. The investigation revealed Tynesha was last seen at the apartment of Timothy. When police visited the apartment building, no one answered the door. The apartment manager informed officers that his unit had been affected by a fire 2 days earlier. A neighbor also reported hearing gunshots in the forest near the apartment complex, prompting the police to bring in a canine unit to search the area. The search dogs quickly caught the scent of decay just dozens of meters from the complex, but it turned out to be the remains of a dead animal. Investigators then focused on the fire at Timothy's apartment. Neighbors had been alarmed by thick black smoke coming from the balcony of Unit 224, which lasted for hours. Firefighters were called to the scene, but Timothy refused to let them in, claiming he was simply grilling meat on several grills on his balcony and that there was no danger. By the time the firefighters arrived, the smoke had disappeared and there was no visible fire. The firefighters eventually convinced Timothy to allow them to inspect the apartment, where they discovered melted ice and pieces of meat in the bathroom. The type of meat was unclear. Since no crime had been committed, grilling meat in one's home isn't illegal. The firefighters left. Shortly afterward, a sheriff's assistant summoned Timothy to the police station for questioning. Calmly, he repeated the same story he had secretly told Gail earlier. Tynesha had left his apartment after an argument sparked by a late-night call from Mark. According to him, she slammed the door and left on foot without saying anything further. With no evidence against him, he was released. Tynesha's family continued to pray for her safe return, but no answers ever came. They were left devastated, feeling abandoned by the authorities and believing no one truly cared about their daughter and sister. The community expressed outrage at the authorities' lack of decisive action. Many believed the media prioritized cases involving missing white girls, while largely ignoring those involving black individuals. Tynesha's sister and cousin sought help from public activist Quennell Ten, a well-known figure in the black community and advocate for justice system reform. Quennell, known for his mistrust of law enforcement, became a prominent voice for families overlooked by the authorities. He promised to uncover the truth, and after his involvement, police began to take the case more seriously. Investigators discovered that Tynesha had been dating a young man named Mark around the time of her disappearance and decided to question him. Initially, Mark avoided police calls, but later contacted them himself. During questioning, Mark revealed that he had traveled to South Padre Island on March 17th. The detectives found it suspicious that he left town after Tynesha went missing, but he explained that he tried to reach her before leaving and only learned about her disappearance after he arrived in South Padre. Attention then shifted to Tynesha's ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who was reportedly the last person to see her alive. Detectives began investigating Timothy thoroughly, looking into his background and speaking with his neighbors. Timothy came from a well-regarded family. His mother worked as a pharmacist, and his stepfather, who raised him after his biological father passed away when he was 2 months old, was a deacon at the Missionary Baptist Church. His mother participated in the church choir, and his younger sister was studying law at the University of Houston. His family was well respected in their community. Timothy himself was a father to a 4-year-old daughter, for whom he had full custody. Neighboring residents described him as quiet, polite, and devoted to his daughter. Though he seemed to live a relatively normal life, investigators uncovered a prior legal issue involving possession of unauthorized substances. This incident occurred well before Tynesha's disappearance. Armed with Timothy's prior written consent, police searched his apartment for clues. As soon as detectives entered Timothy's apartment, they noticed 2 alarming details. First, the smell, an odd mixture of bleach, ammonia, and another unidentifiable odor. Second, the signs of hurried renovations. The kitchen cabinets, walls, door frames, and even the inner part of the tub had been hastily painted white. Additionally, bleach stains were visible on the carpet. There was a dirty mop nearby, and a package of latex gloves was found. The sink, bathroom, and drain had been meticulously cleaned. This raised immediate suspicion of an attempted cover-up. Despite the cleanup efforts, investigators found blood traces in the bathroom. Using luminol, they confirmed the worst. The entire bathroom lit up blue, revealing blood splatters across the walls, floor, shower, toilet, and tank. The discovery prompted forensic experts to collect DNA evidence and other potential clues. While waiting for the results, detectives returned to the area to conduct further interviews and gather additional details. It wasn't long before an alarming report surfaced. According to 911 calls, residents of Timothy's apartment complex had reported seeing flames 3 days before Tynesha's mother, Gail, officially filed the missing persons report. One neighbor described noticing the strong smell of burning rubber and fearing for her home due to the intensity of the fire. Another neighbor, who regularly played video games with Timothy, recalled that he often invited friends over to grill meat. However, during this particular barbecue, he did not extend any invitations. Meanwhile, other residents reported hearing banging noises, running water, and the continuous hum of a garbage disposal coming from Timothy's unit, apartment 224. Piece by piece, a troubling picture began to form, and Timothy quickly became the prime suspect. At that time, Quinnell spoke to Tynesha and Timothy's families and learned a lot about their relationship. Initially, their bond was strong, filled with love and plans for the future. However, it didn't take long for the relationship to become unstable. There were constant arguments and problems. After Tynesha left for college, she confided to her family that she feared Timothy. His controlling nature, driven by jealousy, often crossed boundaries. Timothy's behavior became obsessive. He called Tynesha incessantly, demanding to know her whereabouts and who she spent time with. Even after their breakup, he repeatedly called her dorm neighbors to gather information about her. When they refused, he left them angry messages. Tynesha did not share the full extent of her troubles with her family, as she didn't want to alarm them. However, a close friend admitted that Timothy had once grabbed Tynesha by the neck, threatening to strangle and kill her if she ever left him. On another occasion, when Tynesha declined a ring he gave her on Valentine's Day, Timothy jokingly said he would one day kill her, grill her body, and feed it to dogs. This all occurred about a year and a half earlier. Eventually, things seemed to calm down, and Timothy stopped contacting her until February 2007. A month before the spring break, he called again. Tynesha was apprehensive, worried he wouldn't leave her in peace. She even considered not returning to her city. Despite her fears, she longed to see her family and friends. To avoid any conflict, she calmly talked to Timothy and agreed to meet him before leaving. Though she still had feelings for him, she knew their relationship had no future. Quinnell sought Timothy's side of the story, arranging a meeting at Timothy's apartment. Quinnell found him nervous, with trembling hands, darting eyes, and visible despair. Inside the apartment, Quinnell noticed luminal traces in the bathroom, left by forensic investigators. When Timothy was asked about Tynesha's fate, he hung his head and admitted that she was no longer alive. He admitted he was terrified of death and did not want to die himself. Quinnell persuaded Timothy to help bring closure to Tynesha's family. He led Quinnell to a dumpster behind an apartment building about 5 kilometers from his home. His behavior became erratic, his breathing grew heavy, and his hands started twitching. He refused to even glance at the dumpster. However, when the container's lid was opened, it was empty, as the trash had already been transported to a landfill. Despite exhaustive searches, Tynesha's remains were never recovered. Timothy was arrested and charged with her murder. Tynesha's family was devastated once more. They now knew that Tynesha was gone, but they didn't even have a chance to give her a proper goodbye or burial. While in custody, Timothy initially exercised his right to a lawyer, but later changed his mind. Alone in the interrogation room, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He confessed to the crime. According to Timothy, the night Tynesha disappeared, the two argued over her new boyfriend, Mark. Tynesha was frustrated with Timothy interfering in her life again. In the heat of the argument, she allegedly grabbed a knife from the table and swung at him, leaving a scratch on his hand. Timothy claimed he felt threatened at first, but soon became enraged. He snapped, grabbing her neck with his right hand while trying to take the knife with his left. He strangled her until she dropped the knife and collapsed onto the floor. Panicked and convinced no one would believe him, Timothy chose not to call 911. Instead, he placed Tynesha's body into a large plastic storage container and disposed of it in a dumpster, a location he later pointed out to Quinnell. By the time authorities launched their investigation, the garbage from the dumpster had already been transported to a landfill. Timothy then attempted to end his life by tying a belt around his neck and tying it to a doorknob. However, the attempt was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the police deliberated on how to proceed in their search for Tynesha's body. The landfill spanned an enormous area, receiving several dozen tons of garbage daily. The search could take months and incur high costs, and detectives weren't even certain they would recover her remains. However, the deeper horror lay in what police uncovered next. Details Timothy had initially failed to reveal. Timothy likely would never have fully confessed if investigators hadn't dug further. Suspicious that he was withholding information, the police returned to his apartment and conducted a more thorough search of the balcony, What they discovered during this search was chilling. Experts examined the bathroom and kitchen drains, the gaps on the balcony, and the trash can. They uncovered burnt hair, small charred bone fragments, shards of teeth, and pieces of burnt skin. These items were analyzed for DNA, and the results confirmed the worst. After the murder, Timothy had placed Tynesia's body in the bathroom, disposed of it, and attempted to eliminate all traces. He burned some remains on his balcony grills and disposed of the ashes in the trash. Other body parts were destroyed using a kitchen waste shredder. He scattered additional fragments in various garbage containers. Over the course of 2 to 3 days, Timothy worked to dispose of Tynesia's body, believing that burning her remains would make identification impossible. During this time, firefighters inspecting his apartment later found pieces of what appeared to be meat in a bathtub filled with ice. These turned out to be parts of Tynesia's body. At the time, the firefighters had no idea they had stumbled upon human remains. DNA analysis later confirmed that the body fragments belonged to 19-year-old Tynesia Stewart. Timothy Shepard was then arrested and held on $250,000 bail. After discovering what had happened to her daughter, Gail, Tynesia's mother, demanded that Timothy receive the harshest punishment possible. The prosecutor was equally determined to secure a conviction, but the case nearly fell apart because of Timothy's defense attorney, Chip Lewis. Chip, a well-known lawyer with a history of high-profile cases, had once successfully argued in a previous case that body disposal does not necessarily indicate murder. Now defending Timothy, Chip sought to challenge every piece of evidence. His main argument was that Timothy's confession had been coerced and obtained under duress, claiming detectives had violated legal protocol. Had Chip succeeded, the evidence found in the apartment would have been inadmissible in court, significantly weakening the prosecution's case. Fortunately, the prosecutor was able to persuade the judge to deny the defense's request, and the trial moved forward. The trial of 28-year-old Timothy Wayne Shepard began on September 29, 2008. The prosecutor presented the horrifying details of the crime to those attending the hearings, forcing Tynesia's family to endure the pain of imagining the cruel acts inflicted upon their loved one. Throughout the trial, the defense team argued that Timothy had strangled Tynesia in self-defense and tried to downplay the brutal nature of what followed. For example, regarding a tooth fragment found in Timothy's apartment, the defense ludicrously claimed that Tynesia could have simply dropped it down the sink before her death. In response, the prosecutor countered with evidence that Timothy had used pliers to extract Tynesia's teeth to prevent identification through dental records. This claim was confirmed by forensic experts brought in as witnesses. The grim details painted a horrifying picture of the events and left little doubt about Timothy's actions. The public activist, Quinnell, also addressed the crowd, pledging to seek justice for Tynesia's family. He kept his promise by providing testimony about everything he witnessed. After 4 days of deliberations, the jury found Timothy guilty of murdering his ex-girlfriend, Tynesia. Tynesia's family and friends were overcome with emotion, while Timothy sat cold and indifferent, showing no remorse. When it came time for the verdict, he decided to make a statement in an attempt to gain sympathy from the court. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, he spoke, believing he could convince everyone that he did not deserve a harsh punishment. He expressed a desire to return to his normal life instead of spending the best years of his life in prison. However, his speech failed to evoke any pity. Ultimately, Timothy Wayne Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, the maximum penalty. While justice seemed to prevail, Tynesia's mother, Gail, blamed herself for not recognizing the danger posed by Timothy. She regretted allowing him into her home and into her daughter's life, unaware of what he was truly capable of. After losing her daughter, Gail became determined to prevent other women from suffering at the hands of abusive ex-partners. She now shares Tynesia's story and advocates for healthy relationships, urging parents to be involved in their children's lives. Gail firmly believes that looking out for the well-being of one's child is not interference, but a responsibility every parent must uphold.